Courtney. We called our father's friend, Oliver, and asked for help with the first step of our plan. As a 3-part warlock unit that wasn't blood-linked to us, Tavlor, Harry and Oliver put up an amazingly tight spell over our property. In the beginning, I wasn't sure they were going to pull it off, but I was glad they had. Your father already had protections on the house, Tavlor explained when he finished. But because Charity still technically carries the Adunolfi name, she was able to get past the barriers. I believe Matlock also lowered a lot of the protection fields to allow everyone here for the birthday party, Oliver explained, putting a final flourish in the air. Hopefully, this will amplify the protection he already set to something more difficult to break through. This won't keep out the Phi or shifters that are our allies, will it? I asked, chewing on my lip, anxious now. I glanced between the 3 of them, hoping we hadn't screwed everything up already. Oliver shook his head. No, this field will not let anyone in who means your family harm. It means that everyone else will be able to pass irrespective of race, as long as there are no ill intentions festering in them. I pulled a harsh breath into my mouth, then blew it out. Okay. Thank you so much. Harry came over and stood close enough that I could smell his distinctive scent. I leaned closer, wanting his warmth and support at this time. I was ready to go to bed, to forget all of our problems, but highly doubted that was going to be possible until we figured out how to help Father. I have to go, my father's friend said. But whatever you decide to do to get your father back, please know that I'm in. I'm willing to help, no matter what the risk. I rushed over to him and gave him a huge hug. Thank you, I murmured. That is so appreciated. We'll probably need it. We needed as many powerful friends as we could get. Oliver left with a nod and a flick of his long, dark hair. When I turned around, Mother had entered the room wearing a long dress. She still dressed the way I remembered from when I was young, in vibrant colors and a flowing skirt. I was suddenly struck by nostalgia, when I'd conjured up ideas on how to sneak out, wanting to run from the safety of my home and to explore this world. Now, I wished I'd travel back in time and pull my mother into a hug, thanking her for everything she had done for me and my sisters. Hey Mom, how are you feeling? I asked instead. I didn't want to make this about me, when we needed to get Father back. She smiled, her eyes lacking the sparkle they had once upon a time. Better, thank you, baby girl. Just tired. And stressed by the looks of things. She was probably just as worried about Father as we were. You've done a great job, boys, she said, gesturing to Tavlor and Harry. I can feel the power of your spell all around our home. Thank you. Harry slid a hand around my waist. We'll do everything we can. She glanced at me, that amused twinkle in her eyes returning. Your father does find your relationship amusing, you know. He does? I asked, frowning at her. Dad. Really? Mom reached out and squeezed my arm. Don't get pouty, Courtney. We're allowed to tease you a little. Ava, your oldest sister, fell in love with a warlock Phi adopted council assassin. Bella, my beautiful bookworm who swore she'd never fall in love, married a shifter. Mom smiled at me. Both of them, forbidden unions. And yet my daughters pulled it off. Yeah, and you, my independent daughter, born for an adventure and a rebellion, she said with a laugh. I groaned and pulled my arm out of her hold. Why does everyone think it's ridiculous that I've fallen in love with a warlock? He's not just a warlock. Mom said with a giggle. Oh sweetheart, please let me laugh about something in these dark times. But why me? I pouted. I'd struggled with this one myself. Falling for the council's choice guy made me angry still. Mom sat on the ancient couch and conjured up a pot of tea and some pretty porcelain cups. Courtney, I have to tell you that if I'd been allowed to put bets on who I thought my daughters would marry, I would have put my last dollar on you being the one to marry someone that your father would hate. A human even. She laughed again. As much as I wanted to be angry, I couldn't help but revel in the sound. I didn't think I'd ever hear it again. I crossed my arms over my chest. We're not getting married. We're just, My face burned. Why was I even talking about this with my mother of all people? And right now of all times? Sleeping together? Mom asked, raising a single eyebrow. Harry coughed and cleared his throat loudly. I turned to him, annoyed he was listening to this conversation. What? He asked. Honestly, I might have forgotten he was even here in the first place. He reached into his pants pocket and pulled out a black velvet ring box. I didn't want to propose to you after your father was arrested, but I did plan to ask you. His smile was sheepish as he handed me the box. Look, this isn't exactly how I wanted to do this, and quite frankly the timing is off, but since it's been called into question. He looked at me with his piercing eyes. I'm not just sleeping with you, Court. I can't imagine being with anyone else for as long as I live. Tears blinded me. It was all too much. I know. He said, smiling sheepishly. Wrong timing, like I said. But I wanted you to know. That's all. He slipped the box back into his pocket, and I opened my mouth to call out. I wanted to see what he'd chosen for an engagement ring. But even as I went to speak, I slammed my words back inside. It was the wrong time, he was right. But his intent was pure. What else could I ask for? I could wait. I launched myself at him, hugging him tightly. Thank you. Long moments stretched on as I closed my eyes and held on to him. Harry had been there for me from the very start, and sometimes I felt like I'd be lost without him. Harry! Bella called, running into the room in a fluster. We broke apart, though I still gripped my guy. What's wrong, Bella? I asked, not stepping away from my warlock. You need to hide, she said. The council is coming here. Now. I inhaled sharply, my chest hurting. Why? What does that have to do with me? They voted this afternoon, and they're coming here to tell us the outcome, she explained quickly. I'd never seen Bella so frazzled before, but her concern was palpable. I just got word from a friend and teleported here. Good job on the warding, by the way. I grinned at her. Only you could give us horrible news and insert a compliment at the same time. My sister was amazing in every way. Harry squeezed my hand. Maybe it's time to come out of the shadows, he said gently. Show them where I am, who I stand with. He took in a breath. I need to do this, Court. I can't keep hiding. No. I whispered at him. I stared at him, hoping he could read my mind, hoping he'd vanish away to safety. It's not time yet. How do you know? He hissed back, still visible. I yanked my hand out of his grip and gave him a soft shove. Please, Harry, go. You can't do this. Not now. He set his jaw. I'm not leaving. Stubborn man, I snapped. Mother called out to us, at least make yourself invisible. Then you can hear what happens and help if necessary. I don't think they'll be able to detect you if you're as good as they say you are. Harry glanced over at Mother, then looked back at me. Okay. But I'll be in the corner if you need me. He looked at me again. I'm not leaving. I kissed him hard and fast on the lips, then he vanished. I shivered. Damn, he's good at that. Mother chuckled. Yes, he is. His powers rival your father's. My jaw dropped. Are you serious? She nodded. Of course. I wasn't sure how to process that comment. My father was the most powerful warlock in the realm, and sure, I knew Harry was from a good family and had done amazing things for us. He'd made my bracelet that was strong enough to bring my mother back to life, he'd saved my father's life, Oh my God, I whispered. He's meant to be the next High Warlock, isn't he? Was he the Council's choice? Was that why he was hiding? What bloodline was he from? A million questions raced through my head, but I couldn't ask them now, and there wouldn't be any answers today. Where's Ava? Bella asked, turning towards Tavlor. With Maddie, he said, in the main Phi realm. She's safe. I nodded and turned towards the front door. Okay. Then let's see what these assholes have to say. I walked over to the window and brushed the curtain back to stare out. There were 4 people on the sidewalk, waiting at the gate. I couldn't help the snicker that burst out of my lips. Are they stuck on the pavement? Can they even get in? Tavlor walked over to my side and joined me in staring. Our magic has made it so that only those that don't wish you harm may step onto the property grounds, he reminded me. If they are unable to pass the threshold, we know what their true intentions are. I giggled, watching them wave their hands and mutter incantations, and yet no one was walking up the sidewalk. Not yet. If the situation weren't as serious as it was, I might have found even more amusement in it. Maybe I would have used my magic to mess with them a bit. We might have to go out and speak to them, I said after a moment. They're not getting past the wards and we should take advantage of that. Harry reappeared, a big grin on his face. All 4 of them obviously harbor ill will towards your family, he said, echoing my thoughts. They won't be able to come into the house. I smiled back at him. Which means they're going to be there for a while, I said, then gestured to Bella. Belle, come see. She crossed her arms over her chest and shook her head. No. I want to know what's going on. What they're going to do to Dad. I sighed. She was right, of course. Bella was always right. But she could find amusement even in the worst times. Mom got up off the couch and walked over to Bella. Then we go out, sweetheart. We ask them for their report. But we don't invite them inside and we don't take down these wards. I just lost your father again. I won't lose you girls too. I marched to the front door and gestured to my family, still standing in the living room. Come on then, let's go. There's no point in waiting around. Knowledge was power, and once we knew what their plans were, we could plan a strategy to fight against them. Tavlor, Bella and Mother came up behind me, and together, we walked down the sidewalk towards the Councilors who held our father's fate in their hands. My heart thudded in my chest, pushing adrenaline through my system with lightning-fast speed. Magic tingled through me and over me. I glanced over my shoulder, unable to see where Harry was, but that had definitely been him. He was protecting me, boosting me. I could feel my own magic coursing through my fingertips, ready to fight anyone or anything that was thrown at me. I still couldn't predict what they wanted, but whatever it was, it couldn't be good, especially if the wards wouldn't let them through. I had to be ready, just in case. The 4 council members, 2 witches and 2 warlocks my father's age and older, stared at me as I walked towards them. I flicked my hair back and stopped, about 6 feet from the gate. Confidence radiated through me, knowing Harry was with me, knowing my family had my back if needed. Everyone behind me stopped too, and although N1 stepped in front of me, I could feel the heat of their bodies at my back. Can we help you? I asked, crossing my arms over my chest and staring at every single magical person standing in front of me. I wasn't going to cower before them. Let them look me in the eye. A woman I didn't recognize puffed up and got my attention. We're here to tell you that the council has voted, she said with a nasally voice. I winced at the sound, but besides that, I wasn't going to give them any sign that I was nervous or afraid. I didn't flinch. I didn't even swallow. I lifted my chin and glared harder. Yeah. About what? I demanded. We weren't notified through any official channels that the council was meeting, and we certainly haven't been officially notified as to when my father's trial will be. For the first time, the group looked nervous. It was like they hadn't expected me to be familiar with policies they had put in place. I'd had months of feeling terrible every day, and although I hadn't admitted it to my sisters, I'd read up on our history. On the council. Even on policies, just so I was armed and ready with info when and if I was actually needed. Today was that day, when all that time and work was worth it. Charity said that she spoke to you, Nasal Woman said, though she wasn't as arrogant as before. I smiled at her. That is not the official channels and you all know it, I said primly, giving them a taste of their own medicine. Having my father's spiteful wife saunter into our home and tell us that she was going to do everything in her power to bring down my father and our family is not how things are done. Actually, It flies in face of rules you all voted to put into place, doesn't it? We need everything delivered in writing, so we have records of dates, issuances, everything. You need to give us at least 10 days' notice, and you have no right to vote on anything of this nature without Ava present during those meetings. She is on the council, and an integral part of the future of the High Warlock position, as she is his official heir. The man on the right, with hair as white as snow, cleared his throat then grumbled. We didn't think she'd want to attend such a vote, he put in, his voice weak. I laughed. No, you didn't want my sister stirring up support for our father, I corrected with a knowing smirk. You didn't want her to vote against you. But you've all screwed up and you know it. So what was the vote count? I raised my eyebrows at them all, then tapped my foot impatiently when they hesitated. Well? Surely you have those numbers, don't you? You did come all the way to tell me you voted in the first place, and now you have nothing to say. I find that hard to believe. The snow-haired man squared his shoulders and met my gaze. The vote of no confidence in the Adonolfi bloodline passed, he said firmly. You are all to leave this realm and never return. My stomach dropped, and I immediately wanted to be sick. But I didn't. I couldn't let them know they caught me off guard. I laughed. I laughed and laughed, turning around to gesture to my mother. Did you hear what that jackass said? Mother stepped closer, holding out her hand so that I would take it and stand taller. Keep going, she whispered. You're doing well, Courtney. I managed to stop laughing, but my grin was firmly in place. Well, please go back to the council and tell everyone who voted in the affirmative that they've been relieved of their positions. Permanently. Since my father is currently being held in the jail at the council building and cannot act in his role until he has been set free, Ava will be taking over as High Warlock in his stead. What you have all voted on today is mutiny, and you will be charged with such. I suggest you run before we declare war and take over the whole council. A man who had been standing behind the main group pushed forward. He had red hair like mine and a spattering of freckles across his pale face. You can't do that. You have no power here. The High Warlock is going to be executed, and you're all leaving. Today. His anger was a palpable, horrible beast surrounding him like a shroud. I could feel his hatred and aggression, and I matched it with my own. If he wanted to play, I was here to play. And when I finished with him, I would do the same to all of them. I stalked closer, towards the boundary of the magic that kept our home safe. My shadow was close. I could feel Harry breathing nearby. That spurred me on, knowing he was in my corner, knowing he believed in me. You listen to me. I breathed as I thrusted a finger in his sallow face. My sisters have married into the Phi and Shifter populations, and they are all on our side. My parents are two of the most powerful magical beings in existence, and you think you can just shove us aside and we'll calmly go based on a vote Ava didn't even attend. The man before me was still glaring, but his posture had shifted. He glanced at the others, hoping for some guidance before moving his arm again. I threw up a shield in front of my face, then staggered back under the weight of his spell. He attacked me. I exclaimed. I had been expecting something, but not that. I didn't think he had the nerve. Tavlor stepped around me, and Harry materialized, shoulder to shoulder with the Phi Warlock warrior. They were using their magic on the council members in front of us, and the 5 were dropping to their knees, groaning under the strain. Harry, no you. The red-haired guy was glaring at Harry, and all of a sudden, I could see the familial resemblance. The eyes. The jawline. Shit. This was Harry's younger brother. I stepped in front of my lover and glared down at the man who'd come to harm me. If anyone on the council harms my father, you're all dead. Do you understand? We have more than enough power to overthrow you all. So I suggest you run back to the council and demand they send my father home. If they don't, I would sleep with one eye open if I were you. Harry grabbed me and pulled me back, while Tavlor stepped in front of us and snapped his fingers. The 5 council members were tugged to their feet and shoved together like a strange gathering of dolls. If Matlock is harmed, Tavlor growled at them all, I'll come for you. All of you. Now go. And do what Courtney says or else. Tavlor shoved his magic at them, and they all disappeared, just like Harry had earlier. Where'd they go? I called to Tavlor, who was panting hard from the strain of using his magic in excess. I sent them back to the council building. His eyes softened when he finally took me in. You okay? I nodded, clinging to Harry now that it was over. Yeah. Can we go inside? I didn't want to admit it, but my heart was hammering in my chest, causing my breathing to come out in harsh spurts. I hoped nobody else could see the way my knuckles turned white as I held on to Harry. I wasn't sure what would have happened if I hadn't brought up that shield, and if Harry and Tavlor hadn't stepped in to defend me. My legs were shaking. What the hell had I just done? Yes? Tavlor took one of my arms, and together we followed Mother back inside. Tavlor shut the door, placing another spell over the entry to our house, and I collapsed onto the couch. Now that I was tucked safely inside, the wards up and protecting us, I felt like I could finally breathe. Harry walked over to the fireplace, and my mother sat beside me, making a cup of tea with her magic, then handing it to me. I sipped the tea, tasting some calming magic and not caring. With all the adrenaline leached from my system now, I could barely stop shaking. What had I done? Did I mess everything up? Did I push too hard? Did I let my confidence get the better of me? That was very clever of you, Courtney, Tavlor said, perching on the armrest of the chair opposite of me. Citing all their own rules back at them. I shrugged. I learned a bit when I was staying with Clarissa. She had a lot of council books in her house. Harry was making a growling noises that reminded me of Christian when he was upset. You okay? I called out to my man. Bella was standing behind me and she walked over to Harry, spoke to him quietly, then conjured a glass of whiskey. He took it and threw it back, wincing at the flavor or strength. I wasn't sure. Finally, he nodded. Yes? That was stupid of me, exposing myself. I shouldn't have done that. That was your brother? I asked. He nodded. Yeah, that's Martin. He's only a year or so younger than me. But power-hungry. Something flickered in his eyes, something akin to sorrow. I couldn't imagine what might have happened if one of my sisters was on the opposing side with the stakes as high as they were. There must be some conflict warring in his mind as much as there was anger, frustration, and desperation. I managed to stand and go to him, hugging him tightly. Thank you for coming to protect me, I said, my face against his chest. His familiar scent engulfed me, calming me more than the tea. He sighed and kissed my hair. I've been protecting people for years, but I've never had to save someone I loved, he replied. I was terrified they were going to hurt you. His grip on me tightened. I'm not sure what I would have done if they had. Bella patted me on the arm. You did great, Courtney. I was so scared. I turned back to the room. What are we going to do? As far as they're concerned, we need to leave, and as soon as we do, they're going to kill Dad. Tavlor got up off the seat, his hands curled into fists. Your plan is the right one, Courtney. This is war. We need to overthrow the council and take power of the realm. I gulped. I know I said that, but... No buts, Mother said. Tavlor's right. You were right, Courtney. What they're doing is illegal by their own laws. Matlock is still the most powerful warlock in the realm, and Ava is his legal heir. We need to use that. And our allies, Bella added. Courtney was right. The Fae and the Shifters will back us. And the Magicals too, Harry added. There are a lot of witches and warlocks who hate the council. They'll do whatever they can to create a new one. But it won't just be a council of witches and warlocks, I said, not again. We need to go back to how it was in the beginning. With a mixture of all the races, all working towards a better future for everyone. Mother inhaled sharply, then sobbed. I knew my daughters were going to change the world. What do you need me to do? We all sat down to devise a plan, because thanks to me, the council would be on high alert now, and we needed to get Dad to safety before they took him out of the game for good. Tavlor left to speak to the Phi elders and protect Ava soon after we'd finished planning. She was the High Warlock heir. She was a threat to the council, because within her blood and the magic our father had used to make her his heir was the council. Their heritage, their power, their future. Which meant she was also their target. Sure, Bella and I were also blood heirs, but they needed Ava gone first to truly eliminate the chance of a challenge. I was glad my sister had someone willing to protect her the way Tavlor did. "I'll go to the shifter," Bella said after he left. "I need to locate Christian and tell him what's going on. Maybe they can think of a solution to this, since they've dealt with the council's discrimination plenty of times over." "I'll go with you," Harry said. "The shifter realm is only safe because Matlock infused it with his magic. If the council has sedated him, or put him under a spell to remove his power, the shifters could be vulnerable." "Oh God," Bella whispered, then rushed around the room gathering her books and potions and shoving them into her bag. "Can you stop by Oliver's shop too, Bella?" I asked, taking my sister's forearm in my hand. I hoped it might help calm her down. She looked flustered, like a chicken with its head cut off. "Let him know the plan or send him here. He needs to get everyone ready." She nodded and rushed for the door. Before Harry could leave, I held on to him. I knew time was of the essence, but I couldn't help the way I let my hand linger, the way I stood on my toes and kissed him again. "Stay safe," I managed to say to Harry without getting choked up. He gave me a slight nod before he pressed a quick kiss to my lips again, and hurried after Bella. I watched the front door shut behind them and sighed heavily. "Oh God, please let them be okay," I whispered. I felt like I'd lit the fuse on an explosive, and it was about to go off in my hands. Now that they were gone, all the confidence I'd managed to hold on to completely vanished. My shoulders sagged forward and my chest tightened again. Before I even knew what was happening, tears sprang into my eyes. I blinked them away, trying not to lose myself to my emotions. I had never been good at control, not like Bella, but I needed to try. If I didn't, I was concerned it would be impossible to pull myself from the torrent of emotions swirling within me. "They'll be all right, baby girl," a voice said from behind me. "Don't worry." I turned around to find my mother searching the bookshelves against the wall. "What are you looking for?" I asked. The distraction managed to help me ground myself in the moment. She didn't turn to look at me but continued to run her finger along the spines of the books, reading as she went. "We're going to war, Courtney," she said. Her tone wasn't condescending, but the weight of the words struck me. "Against some of the strongest witches and warlocks in the world. We can't just sit and wallow, feeling sorry for ourselves. We need to prepare." The skin on my stomach tingled, and I lifted my shirt to stare down at the dark sun on my skin. She was right. Of course, she was right. She always was. Mother turned at that moment and stared at me. Her eyes narrowed in on the flesh of skin. "Is that a tattoo?" she asked. I laughed. "Not really," I said, shrugging. "Bella found a protection spell and performed it on Ava and me. Then Ava did it for Bella. I still have mine because no one's ever tried to kill me." Mother turned fully to look at me now. "What about Ava and Bella?" she asked quickly. "What do you think?" I bit my lip, trying to remember if Bella had half of hers left or if it was all gone. I hated that I couldn't remember, but so much had happened in such a short amount of time that it was difficult to keep up. Ava's is completely gone. It saved her life when Charity tried to kill her. Bella. I'm actually not sure. I'll have to ask her. Mother shook her head and inhaled sharply. I've missed so much. I laughed. Yeah, but not much good. Well, the weddings and Maddie were great, but we've had a lot of crap stuff happen too. Mother nodded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears, then she turned back to the bookshelf. Well, let's make sure that no more bad things happen, Courtney, she said. I walked over to her. Are you looking for something specific, Mother? I asked. Maybe I could help. I wasn't into books the way Bella was, but could follow directions. I could do what was needed. Not really. Anything we can use to protect us in this fight would be great. She didn't take her eyes off the spines of the books. I nodded and got to work, pulling texts off the shelf to read through. Clarissa will have some good books. Mother shook her head. No. You can't ask her to come here again, and you certainly can't go to her. You're far too important. I scoffed a little, feeling my cheeks pinch at the thought. Mother, I'm not important. Ava is. I'm just everything. You are everything, Mother said, whispering now. Something twisted in my gut. I didn't like the weight of that word, important, as it applied to me. I shook my head and returned to the couch, then slipped down onto the thick rug and crossed my legs, leaning against the sofa. This is how I like to study or read. On the floor. Mom walked over, then carefully knelt down beside me. You've never realized how much you're like him. I lifted my head and frowned at her. Like who? I glanced over at her. Dad. She smiled. Yes. And my own father. She smiled to herself, one full of nostalgia only she knew. He was so much more powerful than he dared to admit. He was born to poor parents and married at his own station. He never wanted to be seen or acknowledged for his powers, so he played them down. Didn't reveal them to anyone. But I knew. I shrugged at her, then flipped another huge leather book over in my hands to read the blurb on the back. Not sure what you're trying to say, Mom. She reached out and gripped my chin with her fingers, lifting my head so that I'd look at her. There was an intensity in her gaze that shook me to my very core. I couldn't look away. I didn't want to. Then she said, Courtney, you haven't even begun to tap into your powers. Her voice was low but poignant. Your father's strength is there inside of you, of course, the Adenolfi bloodline. I smiled at her for the nice words, but she wasn't finished. She stroked my cheek with her finger and said, but you are also a Melfi witch through and through. Her lips curved up as pride flashed in her eyes. And we are strong. Stronger than most. Not due to luck or carefully chosen breeding. But from a line of witches and warlocks that married for love. Sacrificed for their children, their lovers. My father. Me. You are everything that we were. Afraid of our power. Struggling to deal with the hypocrisies of this world. But you, my love, are strong enough to change it. To change everything. You will right the wrongs of the council, and have the strength that your father and grandfather lacked. I just know it. Her words flowed over me like a cleansing rain, making tears gather in my eyes. You can't possibly know that, Mother, I whispered, even though I desperately wanted to believe it. Of course I can. She smiled at me, full of all the confidence in the world. I know that you think I was crazy to have the three of you on my own, without Matlock or the support of the world. Yes, that thought had occurred to me more than once. Oh well. But I never told you about the premonitions I had, she said, smiling softly. I tilted my head at her, my eyes going wide. What are you talking about? I asked. She smiled broadly now. I've always been afraid of what would happen when you found your father and the magical realm. As you've seen, the council is full of dangerous, nasty individuals. I nodded, waiting for her to tell me something I didn't know. Yeah. But when each of you were born, I would have premonitions surrounding your life. Ava was going to become the High Warlock, but the trials she had to go through to get there were terrifying. I gulped. Bella too. Mother nodded. Yes. Bella's were different. Sometimes I would see her in her library, alone, surrounded by cats. Other flashes I would catch were of children and a husband. But I was never sure which path she would choose. And me. I finally whispered, almost afraid to know. But there was something in me that yearned for that information. Premonitions weren't always correct. The future changed every time you looked at it, one of the reasons I never did. I didn't want to pin my hopes on something that might not even happen. You, she whispered back, are going to bring balance back to the realms, Courtney. Fight for those who can't fight for themselves. You're going to unseat people in power. You're going to do great things. I've already seen it. But even if I hadn't, I know it. I pressed my lips together tightly so I didn't cry. It took me a moment to get myself under control. I wasn't this woman my mother was talking about. That was Ava. She was the strong one. She was the smart one. As if she heard my thoughts, Mother said, "It's you, Courtney. It's always been you." A tear slipped down my cheek and my mother slid closer, wrapping an arm around my shoulder. "Do you trust me?" she asked. I nodded. Of course I did. I leaned on her, something I'd only learned to do recently. Say yes to help and comfort when it was offered. "I'm scared, Mom." She squeezed my shoulder and pulled me a little closer. "I know you are, my little flame. But you're the fire of rebirth. I've already seen it. And soon they'll all know how powerful you are too." I closed my eyes and breathed in the scent of my mother. I didn't know if I had it in me to be the woman she'd seen, but I wouldn't let anyone hurt my family. And if changing this world meant saving everyone from the council, then so be it. The council was going down. They came in droves. The shifters and the Fae. The witches and the warlocks. Our allies against the council. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe the huge number of people willing to risk it all. Willing to help. I knew they would. I knew we had allies and they weren't the type to hide when we needed them, but still, seeing so many people come over brought tears to my eyes. We didn't really want to attract attention by having the meeting at our home, but there was no safer place. Due to the fact that the house and its lands were protected from anyone desiring us harm, no one got past the gate that wasn't an ally. It also helped that the wards were strong and still in place. "Oh, looks like another shifter has been rejected, Bella." I called out to her, keeping my eyes on said shifter. She groaned. "Yeah, well, bad luck." She went back to sorting out the books and cataloging Father's family library to give herself something calming to do. The first couple of shifters that couldn't get past the gate really upset Bella. She took it personally. She told Tavlor the wards were too strong and weren't letting people in who should be able to pass. Once our brother-in-law explained the rules of the spell, Bella begrudgingly let it go. The spell didn't just keep our enemies out, it was for anyone who harbored anger or resentment against our family. Bitterness was an emotion that festered, and it could turn into something dangerous. Just because it lacked immediacy, it didn't mean it wasn't there. That didn't mean, of course, that those people wouldn't turn against us when we went to fight the council, but it protected us on a level that gave me a greater level of comfort. "Oh, there's Ava," I said, watching as my sister, gripping her son to her chest, pushed through the gate and marched up the sidewalk. I rushed to the front door to welcome her. "No problem getting in?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. She frowned at me as she juggled the large toddler on her hip. "Why would I?" she asked, sounding genuinely perplexed. I reached out and touched Maddie's ears, which were slightly pointed due to his Fae heritage. He gurgled at me and my heart melted, another reminder that this was what we were fighting for. Peace. Equal rights. The ability to just be ourselves and live in harmony with one another. "Oh, I don't know," I began to tease, pulling my eyes away from my nephew. "I'm sure you harbor some resentment towards Mother or me." She rolled her eyes. "Of course I do. You two have sent me to stress hell and back multiple times. But the spell knows I'd die before betraying you, so I'm sure that counts for something." I hugged my sister tightly before I started crying, and Tavlor walked out of the kitchen to welcome his wife and baby with open arms. I was just glad she was here and safe. Ava flew at her husband, their son squealing with delight at seeing his dad. The reunion made warmth flood my system. It was nice to see something heartwarming rather than dangerous for a change. I turned away to watch Bella nervously sorting books, then walked over to her. "Should we go speak to everyone?" I asked, leaning against the wall beside her. Bella lifted her head and looked at me, her eyes wide and startled. I don't know." She seemed confused as to why I would even ask her in the first place. "Christian's with the shifters, Harry and Oliver are with the mages, and Tavlor was with the Fae." I crossed my arms over my chest and grinned at her. "Are you leading the saving of the world to the men?" I hoped to alleviate some of the tension in her face. She chewed on her lip, not rising to the bait. I'm worried, Court. I know, I said, leaning on the armrest of one of the couches. There's a lot riding on this. It's everything, she said. Dad's life. Our futures, and everyone else's. We're the only thing standing between the council and its domination of all the other races. I'd thought about that, but hearing Bella say it made my heart heavy. I know. The council had always treated the shifters like animals they could beat and dominate, and the Phi like freaks to be outcast and mistreated. Ava and Bella had done a lot to make life better, but if they weren't there, what would the council do to our friends? They can't win, Bella, I said. They can't. She nodded, but didn't say anything. I blew out a breath. Bella became worried and high-strung sometimes, but I wished I could reassure her in some way. She was always the one who worried more, but I had hoped knowing we had allies, people who wanted to see us succeed, would calm her. If anything, I hoped to have her smile, but she was too focused on the impending war. Which I understood, but still. Oliver walked into the library where we were standing, and gestured for us to follow. I was thankful for the interruption. Come join us, girls. We followed the warlock, our father's oldest friend, into the huge ballroom where we'd had our joint birthday party only days before. So much had happened, it was hard to believe it had only been days. It honestly felt like months or even years. The room was segregated in a very obvious way. To my left, the shifters were huddled, talking. Their clothes were simple, their hair long and wild. To my right were the Phi. Their pointed ears, beige-colored clothes, and ancient auras set them apart from the rest. The smallest group was in the center of the room, in front of us. The mages. The few witches and warlocks that would stand with us against the council. This was our army, and while there were a lot of people here, the tension in the room was obvious. I smiled at them all in greeting, then all eyes shifted to my right. My mother had appeared. Hello everyone, she said, waving gently before walking over to us. This is a lot of people. Tell me about it, I whispered back. Where do we even start? Ava joined us, then turned to the groups. How would you all like to have this conversation, she asked. A rundown on what's happened so far perhaps. Or maybe just hit us with questions and we can work from there. A woman with long blonde hair called out from the witches. The High Warlock is being accused of necromancy because Genevieve is back with us. How can you explain that? Ava turned towards me and gestured. Courtney. Want to explain? I nodded and stepped forward, all eyes on me. Being the youngest meant I rarely ever got attention solely on me, so it was more intimidating to have everyone's complete focus than I expected. I laughed, which was what I did often when nervous. It was my inappropriate response to most things. Sorry. I coughed, hoping to buy myself time. I wanted to answer in the best way, while also being honest. I'm not used to talking like this. Super intimidating. I got lots of smiles of encouragement, so I took a deep breath and continued. It's a long story, but the short version is that I was given a bracelet by a powerful warlock that allowed me to make wishes. Now that I had the hang of things, the words began to come out easier. When I found out that my mother's essence had been saved within the locket she'd given Ava the day she disappeared, I wished her back to us. There was a strange murmur, then the same girl asked, "What do you mean, disappeared?" I glanced over at my mother. This wasn't exactly a question for which I knew the answer. Well, I just didn't know how to explain it the right way. Luckily, she smiled and stepped up. I didn't actually die, she said. I didn't know if all moms were like her, but when she spoke, she had a soothing voice. It was easy to believe, everything was going to be okay. I cast a spell to freeze myself in time, within the locket, until I could be saved. So when I died, there was no body left behind. I just disappeared. Which is what made it possible, and definitely not necromancy. I never actually died. And there was never a body to bring back to life. I was in a stasis of sorts, exhausted from spending 21 years maintaining the private realm I raised my girls in. She smiled at me and I smiled back. She'd sacrificed a lot to keep us safe, and I was finally realizing why and feeling grateful. Not resentful. Not bitter. So the charges are completely false? Oliver asked, already knowing the answer but putting the question out there for the group. They needed to understand why they were here, what we were fighting for. They deserved to know the truth. Yes, I said, taking over again. Of course they are. Charity wants our father executed and us banished from the realm, so you're all left with only them, ruling as they've always ruled. With terror and fear and an iron boot. There was a grumble, then a large male stepped out of the shifter pack, their alpha. Your family has married one of us. Your family has fought with us, for us. The pack is with you. We'll fight to get the High Warlock back. I nodded at him, smiling, thank you. The Phi Elder stepped forward. You have us and all that we are as well. Our magic, our strength. Anything we can provide, we will. Ava stepped up next to me and thanked him for us. She was already fulfilling her duties as father's heir, something that seemed to come so naturally to her. I glanced towards the group led by Oliver. He stepped forward, his chin high. This isn't just about getting Matlock back, he said firmly. The council needs to be dismantled and rebuilt, or else we'll never make any progress at forming new traditions and expectations across the realms. I nodded. Yes, it does. Rebuilt in the image of the original council, with elected members of all races. The mages. The Phi. The shifters. And witches and warlocks, Oliver said. I inhaled sharply. This was a sticking point. Yes. There has always been the High Warlock bloodline. The Alpha Shifter stepped forward, as did the Phi Elder. We were creating an inner circle now. A group similar to how the council should be comprised. Oliver. The Shifter Alpha. The Phi Elder. My mother, Ava, and me. I glanced from person to person, then smiled suddenly. Add in a few more shifters and Phi and we have our council right here, I said. Each of our kind is represented. I shivered as the words rang out with a strange type of magic. As though feeling it, 4 people joined us. 2 female Phi and 2 more male shifters. Oliver's smile was gleeful. That was easier than expected. I inhaled a shaky breath and held out my hand, palm down. To a new council. One that serves the people of all our communities. Ava placed her hand on top of mine, and one at a time they all added their hands to our pile. 10 people. The perfect number. My mother was the last to lay her hand on top, and she spoke a single word. An old magic word that meant promise. Her spell tied us all together, making our pact into a promise that would lead us toward the fight. A war to end all wars in our battle for a better future. We had to rescue my dad before we could take out the whole council. If he was collateral damage in this war, I wouldn't be able to forgive myself. Having said that, there was part of me that wanted to bring them down now just to be done with them. They were an infestation, and I wanted to put them down before they got worse. I couldn't wait until I got the opportunity to do just that. What can we do? I asked Ava and Tavlor. I needed to do something, or I was going to drive myself crazy. You two know the council building's the best. Where will they have him? Our army of people were still in the ballroom, but they were eating now. The witches and warlocks had created tables of food for everyone, and they were eating and talking, and getting to know each other. Which was good. We needed everyone to get along as best as we could if we were going to work well together, trust each other, fight together. Everyone who had committed to be in the new council was in our dining room, eating and strategizing. Tavlor paced the room, Maddie in his arms. I don't know if they'd keep him in the council jails or hide him somewhere else, he said. I was surprised to hear the frustration in his tone. What do you think, Ava? Ava grimaced. Where they kept me was very isolated. No one would have been able to find me or rescue me if it wasn't for the Phi. What about a tracking spell? I asked, looking at Mom more than at anyone else. Surely, we can work out where they are keeping him. Because it really needs to be the first part of the plan. Dad was the council's only blackmail card. They knew that as long as they had him and were threatening his life, we wouldn't take them on full force. It was the only thing they could hold over our head, the only thing that would cause us to hesitate, and I hated that they knew it. What can us shifters do against the council? The Alpha asked, turning his attention to Tavlor. We have muscle, but we can't compete with their magic. How can we help? The shifters had managed to take on the council muscle, with help from my father and Bella's magic. What could they do now? Oliver nodded at the Alpha. I've been working on something for the shifters, he said. Similar to the jewelry you wore in the fight against the council last time. I knew this was coming and well, they're at my shop. I'll get them today. I smiled at the warlock. Part shifter, Oliver was a great ally. He thought of things we didn't, and he was always ready. I wasn't sure where we'd be if we didn't have him. Ava shifted forward on her seat. Mom, she said. You didn't answer the part about the tracking spell. Can we find where Dad is, somehow? Mother opened a book she'd slipped a ribbon in, and turned to the page she'd marked. I found a spell that can do just that, she said. But it will take time to brew, and ingredients I don't have. Oliver stood up and moved over to sit next to Mom, staring down at the spell. That will work well, Genevieve. But you know that this will take you out of the mix. You won't be able to participate. She nodded, flipping through a couple of pages. Yes? I do. But better me than my girls. I looked between the two, trying to figure out what they meant. What are you talking about? I asked, but they ignored my question. Frustration flared in my chest. I tried to temper it. I didn't want to make this about me, but at the same time, I didn't think it was fair to be on the outside of something. I can get you everything except this ingredient, Oliver said, pointing his painted nail at the book. Well, perhaps? Mom turned the list towards the pie, carefully taking a page between her fingers. Could you help us with this final flower bud, you think? The elder looked over at the book, eyes narrowed on the text. After a moment, he nodded. Yes? We can. I stood up and clapped my hands. This is great, I said. I channeled my frustration into something positive. I wasn't going to throw a tantrum like I might have when I was younger. This was bigger than my feelings. So the first step of the plan is complete, kind of. Mom's brewing a location spell, and Oliver has something to protect the shifters with if it comes down to a fight. We were halfway there already. Hope flared in my heart. Oh, it'll come down to a fight, Oliver said, standing up and flicking his coat to straighten it. He adjusted the lapels of his jacket. You saw how many came out to kill the shifters when Bella wanted to marry Christian. Imagine what will happen when their livelihoods are threatened. I hadn't seen the shifter battle. I'd been too sick to fight, but I'd heard how bad it had gotten. And I knew that we may lose or die if we faced off against the council, but I didn't feel like we had a choice anymore. It was us or them. And we couldn't let it be them. I'll start the potion, Mom said, using her authoritative voice. It was one of those tones that brokered no argument. If all of you could bring me the ingredients I'm missing, then we can finish it today. Then once I find out where Matlock is, you can rescue him. But time is of the essence. Once I brew the potion and locate him, we must act immediately. There's no telling if they'll move him during that time or not, and we can't risk waiting. Oliver grabbed his cloak. I'll go now. We will too, said several Phi, gathering their things. You'll need a bodyguard, Tavlor said, following Oliver. Maddie was still in his arms, tugging at his father's ear. Oh, don't worry, Oliver said, looking embarrassed by the High Warlock's King of the Guard's offer. I insist, Tavlor said. You're too valuable to the cause. Before Oliver could respond, Tavlor handed Maddie to Ava, gave his wife a kiss, and they left, the Phi following behind. I watched them go, and everyone else that was left filtered back into the ballroom, including Ava and Maddie. I didn't. I stayed and sat next to Mom, worry tightening my insides. The room felt empty now. Mother, what did Oliver mean by the fact that this spell will take you out of the, what was the word he used? Out of the fight. Out of the equation. I asked. Maybe now that some had departed, she'd be more willing to explain what was going on. Mom turned to me, her hands folded neatly in her lap. When I conjure this spell, I will be locked in place like a compass of sorts, she said. Until your father is recovered, and the spell is undone, I'll be useless to you all. I won't be able to do anything. I didn't even know what to say. I took a moment to simply let her words seep into me. But you're so powerful, Mother, I said, shaking my head. Wouldn't it be better for one of us to create the spell, and stay here while you fight? You're more formidable than the three of us combined. Surely, my mom wanted to take out the council and exact her own form of revenge. She grimaced and I reached out and grabbed her hand. Don't you want to fight the council members personally, Mom? I asked. After everything they did to you. Of course I do, she exclaimed. I hadn't expected the passion in her outburst, but at least it was an emotion I knew and could work with. They're the reason I couldn't marry Matlock. Why I left the realm and raised you all in isolation. They've hurt you and tried to kill you and captured you. Now she was snarling in anger. Then come with us, I insisted. I didn't understand why she would be willing to sit on the sidelines. You can get your revenge on them. She sighed and I could tell she was unhappy. Sweetheart, I can't. That anger deflated slightly, though I could still see flashes of it in her eyes. This spell requires a lot of power, and it will make me very vulnerable. I'll need to stay here on the property, and although I'd love to keep you all here in safety, it's possible that if someone breaks through, I won't be able to defend myself. Horror struck my heart. I'll stay with you, Mom. She smiled sadly. You can't, sweetheart, she said. While I appreciate the offer, this is your fight. You have to be there to take your place on the council. I'll be here as your father's anchor. I'll help you find him, then I want you to send him home to me. I can't trust anyone else except you and your sisters with that task. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a leather strap with a long white crystal attached. I've put a spell on this. It will only work for one person once. When you find your father, you need to decide if he's able to stay and fight, or if it's safer to send him home to me. I tilted my head, a little confused. Why wouldn't he want to fight? Surely, Dad would want to destroy whoever put him in chains? Mother sighed and placed the necklace in my hand. Don't put it on. Keep it in a pocket, or somewhere low on your body. As soon as it's placed around his neck close to his heart, the crystal will transport him home. I slipped the crystal in my jeans back pocket. You didn't answer my question, Mom. She grinned at me. Can't get much past you, can I? Never could, if I'm honest. I waited, staring at her. She wasn't getting out of this. Finally she sighed. Courtney, I know how you envision this rescue. You find your father in a cell, sitting quietly, ready to fight. You let him out and the two of you fight side by side, taking down the council and your enemies. I nodded, unable to deny that's exactly what I saw in my head. Not to mention the fact that we vote in the new council, and I sit beside my dad with the Phi and the shifters. Mom stood up, flicking out her skirts. Sweetheart, your father is hurt. He's dying. I can feel it in my heart as truth. When you find him, if he's still alive, please do as I ask, and get him home to me as quickly as you can. She walked away and my heart sank. My mother was the most intuitive person I'd ever known, and if she said my father was dying, then he was. I jumped to my feet. There wasn't a moment to lose. As soon as we knew where Dad was, the fight was on. I wasn't sure how long everyone was gone, but I passed the time by researching books, spells, anything that might help us in battle. I tried not to think about the risks of Oliver retrieving ingredients, or the shifters being tracked down. The problem was, the council was unpredictable, and I didn't know what the best course of action was when it came to handling them. Everyone returned safely, which was a relief. I'd been running around the house for another hour, talking to people, and strategizing over what we'd do when we found the High Warlock, but every moment I could steal a look, I was watching the clock. What if Tavlor and Oliver were attacked? What if the Fae didn't make it back? This plan hinged on too many moving parts already, and we'd barely started the ball rolling. What if we couldn't get all the ingredients to make the location spell? What would they do to Father? What had they already done? No. I didn't want to think about it. I wouldn't let myself. All I knew was, if things didn't go according to plan, we were screwed. They're back. Ava rushed to the front door to open the house up for her husband and Oliver. Relief washed over me. Thank God. Mother was brewing the parts of the spell she had while she waited for the rest, her huge black cauldron resting on the dining table. Such a cliché, but Mom loved that pot. When Oliver came in holding multiple bags, I shooed him inside, shut the door and practically shoved him towards my mother. She's ready. He chuckled. Okay, baby witch. Stop your pushing. I managed to get him into the dining room, where Mother was. Her face lit up with a smile. Oh, Oliver, she said, clapping her hands together, her eyes filled with relief. I'm so glad you're here. Come help me. She waved him over, and he didn't hesitate to join her. He began taking out herbs and vials, crushing and mixing with my mother. The air smelled like a strange mix of sage and lavender with a hint of something acrid, causing me to wrinkle my nose. Bella walked into the room and came to stand beside me, watching Oliver and Mom working together to create the spell. This is kinda awesome, right? Bella whispered at me. I nodded, keeping my eyes focused on them. Yeah, it is. I wouldn't have agreed with Bella in the past that watching a witch work a spell would be awesome, but Mother's power was awe-inspiring, and Oliver's hand-waving and flamboyance added a touch of theatrics to the show. The fact that these two were working together almost made me feel bad for the council. But then I reminded myself how terrible they all were, and that went out the window. When the front door banged open and the Fae ran in yelling, "Shut the door!" I jumped. My heart pounded in my chest, eyes going wide. What happened? I asked. Tavlor pushed the door shut and bolted it. Then he went to the window, scowled and pulled the blinds down. Bella, help me, he ordered brusquely, pointing to the other side of the house. My sister ran to the other windows, pulling all the blinds down and using her magic to do the same thing to those she couldn't immediately reach. Should we get everyone inside? Ava called out. Yes. Tavlor answered, still working on the windows. Now. Ava bolted out of the ballroom, and I went with her, not even sure what we were running from. There was a group of witches sitting on chairs in the grass. Quick! Come inside. I yelled at them from the door. The four of them turned to look at me, frowning. Why? Fire rained down on them, like a meteor shower in the middle of our backyard. Hurry! I called out as the four witches screamed, running for cover. Two of them fell, the fire burning their clothes. I gasped, lurching forward, then pulling back again. I wanted to help them, save them. But how? One witch got within arm's length of me, then turned to go back to her friends. No! I yelled, grabbing her and pulling her inside. I threw her in as hard as I possibly could. Ava cast out a spell, dragging the others along the ground and into the ballroom. One of them was dead, bleeding from the head, but the other two were crying in pain. Bella! I yelled. Help! I almost felt bad for Bella. We all needed her help, and she couldn't be in 3 places at once, but still, I needed my sister now. But before Bella could reach us, 3 of the Fae walked over and set their hands on the injured witches. I opened my mouth, though whether to tell them to back off or something else, I wasn't sure. Instead, I watched as they began to use their magic, hoping to heal them. I held the witch I'd saved against me for her own good. No, 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 she cried, pushing against me. Please, I need to. Then she sagged, sobbing as she watched her friends writhe in pain. But I held her tightly against me, not letting her go. She couldn't go to them. I wouldn't let her. And honestly, I knew, deep down, it wasn't going to make a difference. White light flowed from the Phi's hands, rushing over the witches until the girls passed out, no longer crying. I finally loosened my grip on the girl I was holding, and she fell to her knees beside her friends. The Phi elder put a hand on the sobbing woman. "Slow your tears, young one. They'll be fine. They just need to rest." The young witch's face was red and tear-stained. "Who would do this?" she asked. "The council," I said between clenched teeth. "And I'm going to find out exactly who it was. Fucking bastards. They deserve to die." I turned around and stomped back into the main house, pushing past all the well-wishers who'd come to see what happened. Mom and Oliver were still mixing and stirring and chanting. I walked past them and went straight to Tavlor, who was holding Maddie tightly against his chest. "What happened?" "Have a look," he said, tilting his head towards the curtains. "They're still out there." My heart was pounding in my chest, adrenaline zinging along my veins. I wanted to scream and run and fight, but the look on Tavlor's face gave me pause. He rarely showed emotion. Even now, his chiseled face was stoic. But I had seen chinks in that indifferent facade, and I knew something was brewing inside him. Something dangerous. Something powerful. I stepped towards the curtain, reached out for the edge, and pushed the heavy material aside so that I could see who was lining our street. I needed to know who would harm these innocents. Who could attack so callously? I hated that I was shocked they could do something like that, because I shouldn't be surprised at all. These were exactly the sort of people we were dealing with. We couldn't forget that. A gasp caught in my throat as I narrowed my eyes. "Fuck me. Courtney." Mom automatically corrected me, but I couldn't take it back. I wouldn't. There were dozens of them, all with wands. All in black. "Who are they?" I asked. "They're the council's guards," Tavlor said. This must be why he looked the way he had. He recognized them. In full battle gear. Those black outfits are protected by all manner of spells. My chest rose and fell as I panted, breathing hard. "Oh my God. They can't get in, can they?" Tavlor rocked back and forth, soothing his toddler who was fussing in his father's arms. "No, I don't think so. But how can we get past them now? We needed to get to the council buildings. We couldn't stay trapped in here." Mom called out behind me. The Phi brought me the final ingredient. I'm almost ready to cast the spell. I turned towards my mom and watched as she closed her eyes, running her hands over the brew. The words she spoke were from an ancient language no one spoke anymore. Then she opened her eyes, the violet color now a vibrant purple. She reached for a cup, scooping up the potion from the cauldron and drinking it. I rushed forward. "Mom, what are you?" I let my voice trail off, trying to make sense of her choices. Oliver pushed out his hand at me. "Stay where you are." Mother began to convulse, then she was falling to the floor. "Catch her," I called out, but Oliver was already there, taking Mother into his arms and carrying her to the couch. It happened so quickly, I was surprised I was able to keep up with her movement. I glanced over at Ava, who was back from her conversations with the Phi, worry written all over her face. "What the hell's going on?" I hissed at Bella. I needed answers. "Just watch," she hissed back, her eyes never wavering from our mother's form. I've never seen this spell done before either. Mother was passed out from what I could see, then suddenly, her eyes popped open. "I need a pen," she said, her voice scratchy. "Paper. Quickly." Bella rushed to get her what she required, but I was transfixed by her eyes. They were strange. Vacant somehow. Unmoving. Unfocused. I couldn't figure out how to describe it. "Mother?" I asked, tiptoeing closer. "Are you okay?" "She's blind," Oliver said, using his magic to create a small table in front of Mother and pressing her hands onto the wood. His tone was soothing. "Here you go, Genevieve. Bella is getting everything you need." "Blind?" I repeated. "It's not permanent, is it?" I looked from Oliver to Bella, to the Phi standing by. Why was no one answering me? "Is that what you meant?" I demanded of Oliver. "That this spell would take her out of the game?" "This spell requires a payment," he answered after another moment. All magic does. The blindness will only be permanent if we don't find Matlock. Her vision is now linked to the person she is searching for. I covered my eyes with my hands, pressing my fingers into my forehead. Oh my God. Why didn't she tell me this? Why did she leave that part out? I can see him, Mother said softly. Her voice had a soft undertone of hope, which caused my heart to stutter. He isn't as weak as I imagined. He has a magic-reducing collar on and he's been beaten for information. But his will is still strong. I dropped my arms and glared at my mother even though she couldn't see me. She was drawing on the paper Bella had put in front of her. I couldn't decipher the crosses and squiggles, but Tavlor was looking over her shoulder, watching intently. Can you tell where he is? I asked him, Ava walking up beside me to link her arm with mine. Ava didn't say anything, but I could sense her tension. Tavlor began to smile, glancing up at Ava. Yes. I know where he is. Ava pulled me in for a hug, and I buried my head in her long blonde hair. Our father was alive but imprisoned. Our mother was blind forever unless we found him. I'd known the stakes were high, but they'd just gotten even worse. My hand went to my belly, where my protection tattoo still lay imprinted into my skin. I had the strongest premonition that I was going to need it today. I didn't know why. Something washed over me, this feeling of peace that left me both anticipating and frightened by what was to come. I was glad for my tattoo, but unsure how I believed it would be used. I sucked in a breath, trying to let my thoughts linger. I couldn't be distracted at a time like this, especially when there were so many things to focus on. Okay, so what's the plan? I asked Ava and Tavlor, the generals in this strange army. Hopefully, they had an idea of what to do and could give me some direction, so I wasn't flailing around like a chicken with its head cut off. Harry stepped into the room, capturing our attention. We need to rescue your dad, then charge the whole council with treason, he said. I frowned at him. Why do we need to do that? I asked. Truthfully, I wanted the council gone. I didn't understand why we would need to charge them with anything. He walked forward, his aura different somehow. Because the council has to be given a chance to stand down, to relinquish their power. Ava scoffed from beside me. As if they're going to do that. Well, it's give up their power or die trying at this point, I said. We can't let the council continue to have control of everyone in every realm. It's wrong. They murdered people without a second thought. I wasn't going to lose a moment's sleep if this came down to a fight. It was them or us. Tavlor nodded. Harry's right. The best way would be to rescue Matlock, get him to safety, then give the council a chance to stand down. Ava stared at him. And when they refuse? Because you know they're not giving up the power they lord over the universe. He reached over his head and pulled his sword from his back. Then we fight. Harry grinned at me, then nodded seriously. Let's get organized. Oliver handed out the bracelets and jewels he'd brought for the shifters, and Tavlor loaded up on weapons. Bella stood beside me, nervously shivering. Are we all going? I stared at her. I hadn't even considered not going. This was our fight. We needed to be there. We needed to be the ones to do something. And honestly, I wanted to get in on the action. I'd been itching to do something, and now I finally had my chance. Ah yes. Ava carried Maddie over to our inner circle. Maybe we don't all need to, she said gently. Bella, if you wanted to stay here with Mother and Maddie, I'd be forever grateful. With Mother blind, she can't watch Maddie, and I wouldn't feel right staying behind when I should be at the front lines. I blinked back tears. Ava, no. I shook my head. You can't cut Bella out. I'm not. Ava hissed at me, handing over her son to Bella. Maddie went willingly to the aunt he'd spent the most time with. Maddie is my life. He's my heart. But he's also the High Warlock's grandson and our heir if we fail. And we could fail, Courtney. We could all die. There needs to be someone here just in case. Because if we don't find father, mother won't regain her sight. And you never know if someone will come after Maddie to try and snuff out our entire line. My eyes burned with tears as Ava put her heart on her sleeve for the whole room to see. Bella, you need to keep him safe. If we fail, run away with him. Please. Bella juggled Maddie on her hip, Christian walking up behind her. I'll stay with my wife, and I'll protect Genevieve and Maddie with my life. Ava flew into Christian's arms, hugging him tight. Then she hugged Bella and went and sat with our mother. I didn't know what was going on, but I was choking on my emotions. Ava pressed her head to Mom's shoulder. I never understood how you could sacrifice your file for your children before Mother. Why you choose to have us, even when you couldn't have our father. But I know now. Maddie's life is all that's important. Mom's sob caught in her throat, then she reached for Ava's hand. I love you, sweetheart. And it's true, that until you're a mother, you'll never know the extent your heart can grow. I glanced over at Tavlor. So you have the backup plan. If we fail, Bella runs with the baby and our bloodline lives on. Tavlor nodded, his jaw clenching tight. My heart was beating too hard now, too fast. You really think we could lose? It bothered me that this was a statement and not a question. Oliver's chuckle entered the room before he did. Oh, sweet Courtney, he said, and while his voice wasn't entirely condescending, it grated on my nerves. Us losing is almost a certainty. It didn't feel like a certainty to me. No, it's not. I glared at the warlock. Why would he say such a thing? He was supposed to encourage everyone, not make them feel like they had to give up before we even started. His grin was truly joyous. That's the spirit. You all ready to go? I blinked. What the hell? I couldn't seem to get a read on him, and that bothered me more than I cared to admit. Did he think we were going to lose or not? I glanced towards the windows. Are the guards still outside? Yes. They'll be our first fight out of here, unless you want to transport straight to the council steps? Oliver waggled his eyebrows, and I laughed. Could you do, everyone? Of course not, he said, lifting his chin. But if you, Harry, Tavlor and Ava take a few each, I'm sure we can transport the whole team together. I glanced at Harry, then back at Oliver. But I'm not as powerful as they are. Fiddlesticks, Oliver announced to the room. You're a Melfi witch and your father's daughter. There's nothing you can't do, Courtney. Now let me explain the spell I used, then let's get moving. I didn't let my insecurities surface again. I just listened to Oliver's instructions on how to perform this spell. The largest, most powerful incantation I'd ever done. Could I really transport myself and 4 others? The protective bubble over our property and house was still in place, obviously, or the guards would be storming our fence. So how were we going to transport out of here? Come on, Ava said, grabbing my arm. You and I are going to take the fight. But what about the spell over the house? I whispered to my sister as we all moved to the individual groups. Will it let us out? Ava grinned at me. Of course. It doesn't stop people getting out, it only prevents the bad guys getting in. I grimaced as I glanced over at the witches lying on the makeshift beds in the ballroom, their bodies healing but their clothes still singed and burnt in places. Why didn't it stop the fire rain? I asked. Ava's lips pressed together in a thin line, her eyes narrowing on the sight before her. I don't know. There must be a hole at the very top of the bubble. I'd say Tavlor would have fixed it by now. Tavlor or Harry, and speak of the warlock. You okay? Harry whispered into my ear, pressing his lips to the side of my face. I closed my eyes and gave myself a brief moment to feel him next to me, to be reassured by his steady presence. Please be safe. I can't lose you. I turned my face so I could look into his amazing blue eyes. My heart stuttered at the sight, and so many emotions rushed towards me that it was difficult keeping up with them all. You take care of you, Shadow, I said, doing everything in my power to keep my voice from trembling. I had to be strong for him. The council will be gunning for you, especially. A smile quivered on his lips a moment before he dropped his head and kissed me. Hard. I let go of Ava and stepped right into Harry's embrace, wrapping my arms around his neck and putting all my love and worry into my kiss. I needed him to know how I felt, how much I cared about him. I wasn't the best with words, but my actions helped me solidify them. When we finally stepped apart, we were both breathing hard. "That better not be a goodbye kiss," he growled at me, rearranging his clothes in a fidgeting manner. I shook my head. "Hell no. That was just good luck. I'll see you at the council buildings. We're meeting at the steps?" Harry nodded. "Tavlor said the best way to get to your dad is through the front door, so it looks like we're going straight into the demon's nest." Harry wished Ava good luck, then stepped over to a group of shifters who I assumed were coming with us. "Do we have any other mages coming?" I asked, casting my gaze back to the witches who'd been hurt. Ava grimaced. "I think a few are joining us in this fight, but they're pretty rattled." I didn't blame them, and my hand went to my belly and my tattoo once more. "You don't have any of your mark left, do you?" Ava shook her head. "No. It's already done its job for me." I groaned. "Yeah, I know, it's my turn. And if I had to jump in front of Ava or Bella to save their lives and use up my free turn, I would. There was nothing I wouldn't do for my family." "Let's do it," Tavlor said, walking over to the remaining mages. I smiled at Ava, then turned towards the Phi who had committed to the fight. The three of them joined hands, then held out their fingers to me. "We have magic also," one of the male elders said with a kind smile. "If you just cast the spell and give us gentle direction, we can do the rest. We don't want you arriving to the fight already drained, Courtney." That sentiment was appreciated, more than I could tell him. Part of me still felt like I was just recovering from being poisoned, but that part needed to get better fast. We were going into this battle as the underdogs, and I wasn't coming out the loser. I refused. I would put my all into this, and whatever happened, I would do everything I could in order to finish it. The council needed to understand that their ways would now be coming to an end, that times had changed, and things were going to be different. What we fought for was crucial to our evolution. It was all or nothing at this point. And if we didn't survive, at least Mom, Bella and Maddie would. There was hope, even in the bleakest circumstances. And that was something I could live with. That was what kept me going. Even if I didn't come out on top, even if I gave my last breath, I knew our legacy would last. "Thank you," I told the Phi and closed my eyes. I began the enchantment, visualizing the stairs out the front of the council building, just like Oliver told me to do. There was a cold chill passing over my skin, then sunshine on my face. I opened my eyes and glanced around. "We made it." "Thank you." "Well done," the Phi man I was standing beside said to me. "Oh yes, here they come." I couldn't see a ripple, or any indication that anyone else was on their way. But the Phi elder was correct. Within moments, Harry, Tavlor, Ava and Oliver all arrived, transporting our full army. I glanced around, checking we had everyone, and a wave of relief washed over me. We'd gotten past the army at our fence. Now we only had to break into the council buildings and rescue my father from a magically hidden cell. Simple. Right. Where to now? I asked Tavlor, who told us he knew where Dad was being held. I tried to keep my voice low, and I didn't want to distract him from what he was doing, but still. If he knew the location, it was important we gotta move on right away. Tavlor pulled the sword from his back. "We fight our way through each door as quickly as possible before they have time to move him," he said. Oh great. This was a big guessing game, and we were pawns on a chessboard, trying to find and defend our king. I wonder if that made Ava our all-powerful queen. The alpha shifter stepped up next to us, tugging off his shirt and revealing a huge chest full of scars and battle wounds. "We'll stay here," he insisted, brokering no room for argument. "We won't let anyone in." Tavlor nodded and held out his hand to the shifter. "Thank you, my friend." The alpha shook Tavlor's hand and nodded. "Good luck." The Alpha and his pack that had joined us shifted right in front of us, clothes shredding and ripping apart as human bodies became wolves. Black fur, silver and brown sprouting through their skin. It was awesome to watch, something that fascinated me. A shiver coursed over my skin as their white pointed teeth flashed when they growled. I grinned at Tavlor. I wouldn't want to take them on, I said, shaking my head. He nodded, his jaw set with grim determination. Everyone else, with me. Tavlor led the charge as we raced into the council building. I didn't get a chance to think about what we were doing. Quite frankly, I didn't want to. I needed to act, to put my mind on autopilot. As soon as the first door opened, we saw warlocks who guarded the first portal entrance. Tavlor threw a spell at one guy, knocking him sideways. The Phi Elder took out the next. Let's go, Tavlor said, rushing for the now unguarded portal. Tavlor put his hand on the panel, typing in the coordinates of the next jump. We'll stay here, two of the Phi said, nodding at the unconscious guards on the floor. In case these two wake or the shifters are breached. We can't risk anyone coming in from behind. A chill of premonition hit me, followed by a wave of fear. No. I adamantly shook my head. I didn't know what came over me, but I needed them to understand how serious I was. We can't leave you here. The Phi Elder put his hand on my shoulder. Do not fear, young one, he said. This is bigger than all of us. And we must fight. I still didn't want to leave him behind. I still didn't want him to risk himself. But what could I do? He was right. We had to fight, all of us, and that meant some risk. I nodded at him. Thank you. Go, he said, giving me a tiny push. I couldn't help but wonder if he knew what he was risking. If he felt what I did. The portal was open. Let's go. Tavlor went straight through, Ava hot on his heels. I went third, with Oliver and Harry coming in behind me. We couldn't stop and think about it now. We had to move. I stepped through to a battle zone, Ava and Tavlor taking on 4 other guards. Harry and Oliver quickly disposed of them, but not before Tavlor was knocked down by a spell. Shit! I rushed over to my brother-in-law, to find him quickly losing his color. Help! I put my hands on him, not even sure what I was doing. His heart was shriveling up like a raisin. No! I gasped out. Help me! Ava and Harry put their hands on Tavlor as well, and Harry ordered, reversal spell. Quickly! Ava groaned in pain. It's too big. It's too late. No. I shook my head, drawing some of the spell into myself. I'll take it. I'll take it all. I could feel the cold icicles of death crawling up my veins, filling my hands from Tavlor's dying body. No. You can't take it all, Harry said, placing his hand on Tavlor's heart. I'll take some. But I still have my tattoo, I gasped out as Ava set her hands over her husband's face. Ava shook her head, and began taking some of the spell too. All of us can take some. We're strong enough to do it, she said firmly. Tavlor's eyes popped open and he gasped loudly, drawing breath. Stop, it's enough, stop. He pushed us away, and everyone took their hands off him. I fell backwards, curling up into a ball as the spell flowed through me. I tried to look at him, tried to see if it worked, but they wouldn't stay opened. My entire body buzzed, and I was lightheaded. Then I was gone in blackness. When Harry shook me awake, I forced myself to get up on my feet. It took me a second to remember what happened, and the first thing I did was lift my t-shirt to stare down at my belly. Is it all gone? I asked, trying to see if my tattoo was still there. Ava put her hand on my stomach. No. About half left. I blew out a breath, relief sweeping through my body. That's good. Save some for later. We'll need it. I grinned at my sister, who flew at me, hugging me tight. Tears were in her eyes and she blinked them away before they could roll down her cheeks. She whispered into my ear, "Thank you." I smiled and hugged her back. No problem. But we better keep going. Tavlor was up on his feet but pale as a bottle of milk. I frowned. I'm not sure you can keep going. He swallowed, his throat working hard. I have to. I'm the only one who knows the way. Harry, my beautiful shadow, stepped up next to my brother-in-law. Lean on me, Tavlor. We'll go through the next few doors together. Harry threw Tavlor's arm over his shoulder and partially carried him to the next portal. Through here. Tavlor nodded, pressing his free hand into the panel and tapping some buttons on the console. I keep waiting for an alarm to go off, I whispered to Ava. Oliver raised an eyebrow at me. You trying to jinx us? Well, no, but... The moment the next portal opened, a blaring alarm began to sound. The swirl of white and silver light beckoned. I nearly jumped back as if something struck me. The alarm caused my body to jerk with vibrations, the sound rattling through my head. I put my hands over my ears and yelled, "Let's go!" The Phi elders motioned to Tavlor that they'd go first, and he nodded, barely able to stand now. It was so strange seeing him so weak. I didn't think I had ever seen him look that way, in all the time I knew him. I never wanted to see him look this way again. Harry and Tavlor were next, stepping through to the next hop, step and jump in this dangerous game. Ava and I followed. The next room we entered was another transient room with 3 guards, the alarms blaring just as loudly in this room. The Phi took on the guards, downing them in mere moments. That one. Tavlor pointed at red-painted door. His voice was strong but tinged with exhaustion. Open it. I rushed over to open the door, revealing a final panel. Will this work, do you think? Ava, Tavlor panted. It needs your blood. Heir to the High Warlock trumps all alarms and lockdowns. Just slice your thumb and press it to the screen. Go now. One of the Phi offered Ava his sword. She didn't hesitate, she simply sliced her thumb, a thin line of red blood forming. She marched across to the screen and pressed her thumb onto it. The panel immediately lit up, and Tavlor stumbled forward, putting most of his weight on Harry. He chanted a spell over the door, and the panel began to swirl with the creation of a portal. My heart skipped a beat. Good. It seemed to be working. Tavlor swayed. This is the final jump. There will be guards on the other side. Perhaps even most of the council. But so is Matlock, so if we can get to him, most of the hard work is over. It's just essential everyone knows what to expect, so they can prepare themselves for it. I pulled the necklace out of my back pocket and held it out to Tavlor. Mother gave this to me. She said it will transport Father home to her. Why would she give you this? Ava asked, suspicion etched into her tone. Her eyes were narrowed on the necklace, though she made no move to take it and inspect it more closely. Because Mother thinks the council will have destroyed Dad's ability to fight, I said. If they haven't, Tavlor, you take it and get home to Maddie. Tavlor shook his head. No. I can't leave you. If you get yourself killed, you'll be no good to Ava or Maddie. You've gotten us this far, Tavlor. Don't be afraid to take it. I lifted it up a bit higher. It's like you said, we don't know what to expect. At least this way, we can try and have some kind of plan that will get you or Father to safety if necessary. He grabbed it out of my hand but didn't put it on. I'll get it to Matlock. I won't be any good in a fight now. The Phi pulled their weapons from their sheaths, long swords and knives aplenty. They seemed to glisten even in the dim lighting. The elder charged through the portal, then another and another. Harry went next with Tavlor, then it was Ava and me. I tried to ignore the way my heart pounded in my chest like a drum, and the way sweat began to bead against the back of my neck. There was no time to be afraid. I grabbed my sister's hand. No matter what happens, please know, I love you, big sister. I always have. And I believe in you. Ava nodded once, sharply, all business. Tell me that again tonight, after we're all safe and well at home. Let's do it. We jumped through the portal, passing through that cold nothingness that I hated. Then we were inside a courtroom, our team standing in a circle with their backs to each other, their weapons pointed out. No need for any of that, Charity's voice rang out around us, as calm as an untouched pond. I glanced up at the stage, drawing my magic out of my center and dragging it around me like a shield. The whole council was here, which meant the second part of our plan could be put into action, charging the council with treason against the High Warlock and his heirs and telling them it was time to step down. Ava stepped out of the circle of protection, facing the members of the council. "We're here for my father. Your father has been charged and convicted of necromancy, and he will die soon. Your whole family is to leave the magic realm and never return. You are outcasts and will soon be forgotten." Charity's face was smug. Too smug. She'd already won as far as she was concerned. "Where's out, father?" Ava called out, glancing around. "We demand to see him." "Of course," Charity said. "I'll grant a last request." She snapped her fingers, and a door opened to the right of the stage. A man pushed a wheelchair into the room. In the wheelchair was our father, and he was barely breathing. His hair had all but fallen out and he'd aged 20 years. "What the hell did you do to him?" I called out, pushing past the warrior Phi to stand beside my sister. Charity's lips twisted with glee. "Advanced interrogation techniques, all of them legal. Don't worry." I clenched my teeth tightly closed, swallowing my war cry. "Oh bitch, you're gonna pay for that." Charity had given us no other option than to take her out. There was no way she was going to choose any other path than her winning, which meant she had to die. I wasn't quite sure how I felt about that. Her decision didn't surprise me in the least. At the same time, I didn't like knowing how much I looked forward to her death. Did that make me a monster? No. Because if it were anyone else, I didn't think I'd feel the same way. This woman had ruined my mother's life, threatened me and my sisters and everyone we loved, all because she wanted power. She was rooted in prejudiced traditionalism and didn't care about anyone but herself. And instead of working with us, she would force our hand. She had to die or else she wouldn't stop. I glanced behind me to Tavlor, who was standing on his own now. He had the necklace. He had to get it to Dad before he died right in front of our eyes. After everything we had been through, we couldn't risk him dying. Then everything would be for nothing. Advanced interrogation techniques had always been code for torture, but my father looked like he'd been dragged through a hedge backwards and then stood on for 20 years. I shook myself. I had to stop focusing on Dad. He'd be fine once we got him back to Mother. We just had to get to him, and there were a lot of council members between us and him. "You can't vote without me," Ava said, addressing the council. "And not only are you wrong, you have no proof of necromancy. Your mother was dead. Now she's alive," one of the old guys said, standing up with an arrogant swish of his cloak. "There was no body," I snapped at him. "She was never dead." "How do you mean?" Another witch asked, this one younger but with an iron will I could feel from where I was standing. Ava answered for us. "We thought Mother had died because her body simply disappeared one day," she said. "But she had cast a spell to transfer her soul into a necklace and her body into stasis, waiting until someone called her home again." The woman's eyes lit up, and her smile was genuine. "Genevieve always was a powerful witch." "This changes things," the man next to her said. "That's not necromancy." "But it's illegal," Charity countered, her voice rising in volume and pitch. "And proof we need to charge Genevieve with crimes against the natural order also." If we had been in a different situation, I would have laughed. She reminded me of a child throwing a tantrum because she wasn't getting her way. She grasped at this straw so tightly she couldn't see the forest for the trees. This would be her downfall. She had to know that. "Then what crimes has my father committed?" I asked, throwing my arms out. "Certainly not necromancy or mutiny against the council. He has been a great high warlock, sacrificing his love, his children, his life for you." Charity glared down at me from her perch on the stage, and somehow it felt like her nose was stuck in the air. "Your father was still planning on bringing Genevieve back from the dead," she said snidely. Despite her anger, jealousy tainted her words, which I didn't understand, because I highly doubted she actually cared about him. His bedroom was lined with books on necromancy. "And that's a crime?" Ava demanded. Bullshit. Those books exist in the library. They exist in all your homes. My father is allowed to read anything he likes. Research anything he wants. He didn't actually do anything. He is not guilty of any crime. An old man I recognized from the council moved over to where our father's wheelchair was and started pushing him in our direction. My heart thumped harder in my chest. Yes. Yes. Please. Bring him closer. The Adenolfi family is done in our world, the old guy announced. I harbor no ill will towards Matlock or you children. But we don't want you in our council, nor our realm any longer. Take him and go. Angus. You can't do that. Charity yelled from the stage. Dad was almost close enough to touch, and Tavlor surged between us, pressing the necklace into my palm. I curled my fingers around it, the smooth, cool stone pressing into my palm so hard, I was sure there would be indentations in my skin. I couldn't let it go. I couldn't risk losing it. I glanced at my brother-in-law, who was looking better than he had moments ago. I took the necklace and slid it into my back pocket once more. I needed my hands free. Take him, the old guy Angus said. And go. No. Charity screamed now. He is not getting away with this. She hurried down the steps to get off the stage, and I stood frozen watching her act like some sort of spoiled 5-year-old. Ava wasn't shocked or frozen, she rushed forward to grab hold of Dad's wheelchair and pushed him closer to me. I needed to get to him, as quickly as possible. I couldn't misstep, or else Father was done for. Thank you, Angus. My father doesn't deserve this, you're right. He deserves to be home, with our mother. I couldn't drag my eyes away from Charity storming towards us like a steam engine. I racked my brain, trying to figure out a way to prepare for someone who was this unpredictable. Right, Courtney? Ava said, pushing the wheelchair against me to bump my shins. Ow! I cried, the pain snapping me out of the daze. You're right, sis. I snatched the necklace out of my pocket and slipped it around my father's neck. I didn't know how I kept my fingers steady as I secured it behind his neck, how I hadn't dropped it at least 3 times already. He was shaking now, and his eyes were closing as though he had no choice but to pass out. I kissed his cheek and moved the pendant to his skin, pressing it against his chest. Travel safe, Dad. When I stood up, he was gone. Charity's wail of anger echoed through the room, and she pushed me back. I would have fallen if Harry hadn't grabbed me, holding me tight against his body. Charity patted down the wheelchair, then tossed it sideways, the clunk of the wheels making a startling sound. Where is he? She screamed at Ava, only to have my sister shove our supposed stepmother back. Get the fuck off me! Ava exclaimed. Charity began chanting a spell, and Harry rushed in front of me, dragging Ava behind him. Don't even think about it, Charity, he said in a firm voice. Harry threw a spell at the high witch that landed her on her ass. She let out a pained grunt, and I couldn't stop the way my lips curved up into a smirk. Good. I wanted her to experience as much pain as possible. Slow. Tortuous. I wanted her to suffer. Harry, she spat, glaring up at him. You're a disgrace to your family. He laughed. Better than being like you, he said. Killing innocent people. Destroying the very men and women this council was created to protect. Manipulating our traditions in order to further your selfish exploits. You're a wretch, Genevieve. Harry. Stop. I glanced over at a couple standing by the stage. They looked vaguely familiar, but I couldn't place them. Harry didn't react too obviously, but I could see the way his spine went rigid. He knew them. But it was more than that. Judging by how pale his face was, he was familiar with them. Then he turned ever so slightly. Mother. Father. No, I will not stop. I will never stop until this world is returned to how it should be. Fair. Just. Charity cackled out a laugh as she was hauled to her feet by the men around her. Fair. Just. What world are you living in, Harry? You're a child of the council. You could have been the next high warlock. Harry laughed, the sound bitter and nasty. Oh yeah? Unseat Ava, throw out Tavlor? Two of the brightest, smartest people I know. No thank you, Charity. I'd rather unseat you. I glanced over at Ava as Harry's words fell over the room. He'd thrown down the gauntlet, and it was time that we backed him up. Ava turned towards the room. This council needs to be disbanded. None of you deserve the roles you've protected with your bloodlines for generations. The original council was elected and had all races. Shifters and the witches and warlocks. Blasphemy, Charity spat. We will never allow that mix of races to taint what we've spent centuries purifying. I laughed. No. It's history, you selfish bitch, I said as though she were an idiot. Which she was. Bella found the books in my father's library, and I know that you knew. That you all were told your ancestors stole their positions. Changed the laws to suit themselves. You've committed crime after crime against the and the shifters, and it's time you all retired to your private realms. It was a good outcome for them. But from the noises being made in the room, they weren't going quietly. A large tub of lard warlock sauntered up to the front of the group. I suggest you leave here now, young lady. You've gotten your father, and that's what you came here for. I stepped closer to Harry and Ava, smiling back at the warlock, who was obviously not going to quietly step away. We didn't just come here to save Dad, I told him. There's more to this than my father. We came here to change the world. So if you're not going to take the easy option and retire peacefully, then we'll have to settle this the old-fashioned way. And I promise you, you won't like the old-fashioned way. His eyebrows rose. Old-fashioned? My dear, you're barely more than a child. You don't know anything about this world. About magic. About right or wrong. Traditions and family expectations. You've lived a sheltered life. Ava burst out laughing, and the warlock switched his gaze to her. Did I say something funny, Ava? He demanded. His cheeks were colored red, and he was practically sputtering. She nodded, covering her mouth with her hand for a moment before she pulled herself together to answer. I never believed my mother, you know? That the world was dangerous, that the magical realms were run by sadistic, nasty men and women too. And I just couldn't. She let her voice trail off. Ava shook her head. But after everything I learned since coming here, I realized Mom was right. None of you deserve your positions on this council. And she was right to keep us from you until we were grown and ready to fight. She taught us magic constantly. I hated her at times because of the perfection she demanded from us. From me especially. But now, I'm so grateful for everything she did because now I know she couldn't do it. She ran away. But that's not going to happen with us. She was right. Mother had kept us safe from these people who would have destroyed us. Changed our values, and maybe even killed us off as children. So, Ava called out to the group again, for those of you who would like to step down from the council and retire to your private realms, please do so now. The group began to look around at each other, obviously considering it. Others like Charity and Fatso glared at us. And for those of us who won't. I glanced over my shoulder at the holding their swords, ready to battle alongside us. Be prepared to fight, because we aren't leaving here until a new council has been elected, and the world has changed for the better. I didn't get any warning, but there was a shot of lightning across the room, coming straight for Harry. I dove in front of him, the magical death shot hitting me right in the chest. Pain exploded inside my body, and everything went black. When I opened my eyes again, my protection tattoo was gone. I could feel it, or at least I could feel the lack of it. I placed my hand over my stomach, as though I could wipe at my skin and it would somehow reappear. But no. It was gone. My skin tingled and I closed my eyes, not sure how I felt about it. I was just glad that it had been there for me to use. Harry was standing in front of me now, putting a wall up as a defense shield. The council members' numbers had dropped, and even as I stared into the back corners of the room, another couple disappeared. Something in my mind snapped. They were running away, back to their family realms. I managed to roll up and get to my feet, standing behind Harry while I got my balance. My body was still woozy, but I needed to push past it. I needed to get my footing and keep going. We needed all the power we could get, and I couldn't let them lose me. I glanced over at Harry. He wasn't fighting, and he should be. Harry was an incredible warlock, and his offensive skills killed mine. He needed to get in there, not protect me. I put a hand to his back and yelled over the raucous in the room. "Drop the shield and fight," I told him. "I'm okay." The truth was, I wasn't sure if I was okay, but I could move, I could speak, and Harry didn't need to know anything else. He just needed to move. We couldn't keep waiting around. Harry immediately began firing at the warlocks standing 10 feet from us. They fell backwards, gasping with horror at Harry's strength. It was like they'd forgotten just what he was capable of. Poor bastards. Tavlor and Ava were shoulder to shoulder, protecting each other and fighting Charity now. Charity was a hot mess. Her hair had tumbled down over her shoulders, and she was firing over and over at my sister. She was a banshee, screaming and yelling. She'd lost all control over herself, shouting insults and slurs the way she fired incantations and spells. It was like she could see everything she had worked so hard to build up start to crumble before her, and for the first time this started, she realized that there was a good chance she wasn't going to win this. I didn't have any power left. My breath had left me and the rest of my body felt numb. I tried to take a breath, but I wasn't able. The Fae were fighting too, using their swords and a multitude of spells to protect themselves. One of the elders was done on the ground, bleeding from the head. My eyes darted to his chest. He was still breathing. I dropped to my knee, wincing at the effort it took, and crawled over to him, the noise of the battle raging on over my head. I held my breath. I couldn't focus on the possibility that I could get hurt, or worse. Instead, I kept my gaze focused on him. If I could reach him, maybe I could help. Once I reached him, it felt like a boulder fell off my shoulders. "Are you okay?" I shouted at him over the clatter and banging. "What can I do?" He gasped, blood bubbling between his lips. "Win this fight," he managed to say. "Don't let them hurt my people, please." I put a hand on his chest and stared into his eyes. "I promise, I'll do everything I can to protect them." He nodded, then his lips opened on a final gasp and he stopped breathing. "No." Another Fae dropped, then I heard Ava's cry. She was done on her knees and she was bleeding. Rage boiled inside me, hot and angry and powerful. I got to my feet, my hands tingling with the magic of my bloodline. "All of you stop. Now." I blasted the room with the power in my fingers, bellowing loudly as the pain in my arms and hands was almost too much to bear. The council members all dropped to their knees. Every single one. The expressions on their faces, pure shock and amazement, were almost worth the pain I was going through. "I can't hold them." I managed to groan out as sweat dotted my face. Harry stumbled forward, touching each of them on their shoulder, a pair of handcuffs appearing, tying their hands together in front of them. He worked quickly. It amazed me to see him make something so complicated look so simple. A rush of pride slid across my chest. That was my man right there. Tavlor checked on Ava, then rushed forward to help Harry. It was good to see Tavlor moving. Still not up to his usual speed and dexterity, but enough that there was hope he'd be fine. When they were finally done, Harry called out, "Let go, Court." I dropped my arms, crying out at the pain. I tried so hard to hold it back. The last thing I wanted was to have anyone worry about me, when there were so many others worse off. My fingernails were bleeding, and my soul felt like it had been wrenched out of my body, but I was still breathing. I was still here. I fell to my knees, and this time crawled over to my sister, who was lying on the ground, holding her shoulder. I needed the support. I needed to feel that she was okay, just to make sure. "Ava!" I called out, putting my head to her chest to feel the rapid beating of her heart, a reassurance that she was still alive overwhelming me. Tears sprung into my eyes. I tried to blink them away, but a few managed to slip past me. "I'm okay," she said through gritted teeth. Her voice was strained and it was clear she was in pain just as I was. "I just need a healer." Something dark caught my attention, and that's when I saw Oliver on the ground, his long hair covering his face. My heart stopped. My skin grew cold. "No. No." I stumbled and half crawled over to him. "No, no, no." I brushed his hair out of his face to see if he was still alive, but his skin was cold, his eyes were staring sightlessly. There was an eerie stillness about him, something I couldn't describe but something I knew down to the very marrow of my bones. Charity's laugh sounded in the room and I rose to my feet, hatred in my heart. "What are you laughing at?" I demanded. "You lost. You're going to sit in jail until you're dead." She was still smirking, which made me even angrier. She lifted her chin as I walked closer. "No jail will hold me." I wanted to kill her, I did. I wrapped my hands around her throat and squeezed hard. Ava called out, "No, Courtney. Don't do it. It's what she wants." But I didn't care if it was what she wanted. Good. I wanted it too. I wanted to make her suffer the way she made all of us suffer. She deserved as much. She deserved worse. Charity's eyes were bulging as she gagged. A part of me cheered the violence on, but most of me couldn't go through with it. When the tears rose and blinded me, my heart broke. I let her go. "I can't do it," I sobbed, falling sideways and into Harry's arms. "She deserves to die. She tried to kill Ava. She tried to kill my father. She's behind poisoning me. But I can't do it." Harry held me tight, his support giving me strength at a time when I lacked it. "She deserves to be punished, you're right. More than anyone I know." The rest of the council was hanging their heads, exhausted and ready for the next step. Not that bitch Charity. Her head was high. She'd never give up. A flash of movement to my left had me turning to look at who was moving. One of the younger Phi marched straight up to Charity, and with a single swing, took her head off her body with his sword. My jaw dropped as I watched her head bounce on the carpet, that smug look of satisfaction carved eternally into her face. An uproar went up around us as the council shrieked with terror, but I turned into Harry's shoulder and cuddled into him. It was over. It was finally over. The Phi patched up Ava and Tavlor, then stayed to deal with the councilors that had been captured. I needed to go home and see my father, and to check on the rest of our army. "I'll give you a full report as soon as I can," I told Ava, hugging her tight but conscious of her injured shoulder. I didn't want to add to her pain if I could help it, but I also couldn't stop myself from holding her as tightly as I possibly could. I wasn't sure how the battle was going to end, and the fact that both of them had come out safely was a blessing. "Be careful," she said. "The council guards are still out there. There are people still loyal to these assholes." She gestured to the group behind her, now in chains. "If they don't know what happened, they will soon, and I highly doubt they're going to be delighted by the outcome. You don't know what to expect." I nodded resolutely. "We will." I took Harry's hand and together we hopped back through each portal door. They were all empty of the guards that had been there when we first came through. We were lucky, especially considering how exhausted we both were. I wasn't sure how I remained standing when all I wanted to do was collapse. Sleep sounded so good right now, and it took everything in me to keep going when all I wanted was some rest and maybe some food. "That's not good," Harry said, "having all these doors unprotected." His voice was low, and he didn't bother to hide his wariness from me, something I appreciated. I shrugged. "Maybe. I always saw these portals as a way for the council to monitor who went where, and control them, of course. I'm not sure why any realm needs a guard, if I'm being honest with you." Harry's eyebrows furrowed as though he disagreed, then he tilted his head to the side, his face clearing. It was like he was letting my words sink in. "You might be right there." He nodded towards the door in front of us. "Final door. Hopefully the shifters are still all right." My stomach plummeted. "Let's go." When we stepped through the final cold, shivery portal, I lifted an arm, ready to protect us with a magical shield if necessary. I didn't quite know what to expect, and despite my exhaustion, I had to make sure we were safe, and that I was prepared to take whatever steps needed to ensure that. But there was no one there. No one in the foyer, nor by the door. The more I thought about it, the more I realized just how eerie it was. I glanced through the glass window, seeing one of the shifters standing on the steps. "Look. There's Jared," said one of Christian's pack. It was a relief to see him there, and before I could stop myself, I rushed through the door and outside where Jared and 2 other shifters were standing. Their clothes were mere rags, shredded in places that were almost obscene. "Let me help you with those clothes," Harry said, waving his hands and creating new jeans, t-shirts and shoes for all 3 men. I tried to avoid looking at anything that they might have wanted to shield me from. Jared glanced down at his new threads. "Thanks, man." "What happened?" I asked, gesturing to the steps. The sun was setting. It was the end of the day here. I'd lost track of time inside the council buildings. There was no natural light in the courtrooms, making it difficult to see. Not only that, but the temperature was dropping as well. Now that the battle was over, the adrenaline that kept me so warm had worn off. Instead, my bare skin was starting to pinch, and goosebumps decorated my skin. "The council guards came," Jared said, touching the necklace around his throat. "And we fought them." "And you won?" I coaxed him. I needed to hear the answer for him, not wanting to make any assumptions when anything could have happened. "You did, right? Or you wouldn't be here." Jared nodded, but his face was solemn. "We did, but there were a lot of casualties," he murmured. "I'm sorry," I whispered. He shook himself and lifted his chin as though trying to exorcise the ghosts. "What happened with the council?" "Yeah," one of the other guys said, his hair cut super short. "Please tell us that all this death was worth it." I gulped and forced a smile to my face. "I'll never say that people dying were worth it, but yes, we won," I told them. "The council is locked up. Ava and Tavlor are in court now, rewriting the laws and preparing for the new council." I took in a breath. I think it's finally over." Jared and his friends cheered, then he said, "Hang on, new council?" He furrowed his brow, like he was trying to make sense of that. I nodded. "Yes. One with shifters, day witches and warlocks. A fair council, where everyone is equal and everyone is represented, so all needs are expressed and met. A kingdom of equality. At least that was the goal." The shifter kids grinned, and fist bumped one another playfully. It made my heart melt to see them playing, especially at a time like this. "We need to get back to the pack grounds and tell everyone." "But we were told to stay here," Jared said, glaring at the other men. "Harry and I are heading home. We'll tell Christian you're here. Maybe he'll know what to do." I shrugged. I wasn't in the mood to argue about orders, especially since I didn't know what he had been instructed to do. "That'd be great," the kid said, relieved. "Let's go," Harry said, taking my hand and dragging me down the steps. His fingers were laced through mine, warmth radiating through his touch. "Shall we run? Or you want to transport?" I sighed. I don't think I have enough magic left to transport myself anywhere, but running sounds just as awful. Harry smiled. "Well, I could transport us both, but how about we walk? Get some fresh air for a minute?" I laughed as we strolled along the street. I had blood on my sleeves and jeans. We'd just been through a battle for the power to the universe, but Harry wanted to walk. "Okay. Sounds like a plan." The streets were markedly quiet. "None of the shops are open," I said, waving my hand at the cafes and stores. Harry nodded. Maybe they got wind of the power shift? Those that were loyal to the old council might have moved out. "That fast?" I asked. "Seems strange?" "Oh yeah. When it's their lives on the line, people will use up all their magic, currency, whatever they have to stay safe," he said. "Suddenly you realize what's truly important, and most of the time it isn't what you think it is." We turned the corner and walked along our street. I stared at the house across the road. Weird how quickly this house has become home. I was talking more to myself than to Harry, and he knew that. Instead of responding, his fingers gave mine a gentle squeeze, an acknowledgement of my words. Harry and I walked across the street, finding no guards or enemies present. My heart beat a little too fast, so I pushed open the gate and hurried up the path. I'd feel safer once I was inside. It still felt weird that we hadn't been challenged by anyone. It bothered me more than I cared to admit. When I shoved open the huge door, I called out, "Mom! Are you here? Did Dad make it?" My heart hammered in my chest. I didn't realize just how important it was to me to hear that Dad made it here safely, and that he was all right, until this moment. Mother walked around the corner, a huge grin on her face, her sight restored. Her eyes focused on me and tears filled them. "Yes and yes. Welcome home." She opened her arms to me and I flew into them, squeezing her tight. "It's over, Mom. All of it. It's finally over." Mom squeezed me a little too hard, but I didn't care. Then I pulled back, anxious to see Dad and tell her what happened. "Where's Dad?" Mom glanced over at Harry. "Both of you come. Bella and I have been working on him since he got back." We followed Mother up the stairs and into my parents' bedroom. Dad was laying in the middle of the bed, and Bella was wiping his forehead with a washcloth. "Oh my God, I'm so glad you're all right." Bella rushed over to me and hugged me tight. "I've been so afraid." When she pulled back, her face was twisted with worry. "Christian is just putting Maddie down for a nap. I'll get him, because he'll want to hear everything." Just as she turned to go find Christian, he walked in the door, shaking Harry's hand solemnly. "Is everything okay?" "Yes," I said. "We defeated the council and saved Dad." "What about the shifters?" Christian asked. Harry answered, "There were 3 teenagers at the steps where they made their stand against the council. They said that there were casualties, but we're happy to know that we defeated the council." Christian began to back up towards the door. "I have to go." "Don't you want to know what happened?" I called out. "Are they all dead?" he asked, his clipped tone revealing he wanted to get back to his pack. I followed him to the door. "Yes, or captured or surrendered. So please let your people know that Ava is working on a new plan moving forward, with everyone involved." "Thank you," Christian said, yanking open the door. "Bella." "Go," she said. "I'll catch up later. I need to stay with Dad for a while." Christian nodded and closed the door, leaving us alone to celebrate our victory. Dad was awake and conscious, though barely able to sit up. As much as I wanted to rush over to him, to throw my arms around him and pull him into a hug, I couldn't bring myself to. "Not yet." "What's wrong with him?" I asked, sitting on the chair beside the bed. I didn't want to be rude, but also needed answers. "They tortured him with spells, stripped his magic and took years off his life," Mother said, mixing up a tea beside the bed, then offering it to him. I watched as her eyes softened when they took him in, and her fingers gently brought the cup to his mouth. Dad rolled to the side as though he knew exactly what she expected from him, and Mother carefully tipped some of the hot tea into his mouth. He groaned, then fell back again. "Damn, I feel like death." At least he could speak. At least he could joke. That had to be a good sign. "But you're not dead," I said, grinning at him. Harry stepped up next to the bed. "I'd like to go and deliver the news of Oliver's death to the shifters, and check on the witches as well," he said. He placed his hand on my shoulder, giving it a gentle squeeze. I nodded at him. "Of course. See you later." He stepped forward to give me a soft kiss, then waved at the rest of my family and slipped out of the room. "Tell us everything," Mom said, helping Dad to lift up a little, plumping up multiple pillows behind his back and neck. Ava and I sat down and regaled our parents with all the details of our battle. Us fighting through each step of the way, until finally winning the battle with Council. "So, a lot of the Council is still alive?" "They ran?" Mom asked, sounding fascinated. I nodded, wrapping my arms around myself. "Yeah, at least 10 of them disappeared, taking Ava's offer to just retire to their family realms. We hope so anyway. I'm not sure if I would have done the same thing." If I would have trusted them, but I let my voice trail off. I suppose there's nothing much we can do except see what happens. And Charity's dead? Mom asked, her tone a little different. Maybe a little hopeful. I couldn't blame her. I would be too. Very dead, I said, taking the cup of tea Bella offered me. I gave my sister a small smile. Just seeing her here filled me with relief, knowing she was okay. Even though she hadn't been part of the fight, she was still just as important. It was a gruesome end. Death by decapitation, but at least it was fast. Although, if I were being honest with myself, I thought she deserved to suffer more. Mom scoffed. She didn't deserve an easy, quick death, she said, mirroring my thoughts. But I'm glad she died, knowing the council will soon be full of Phi and shifters and my daughters. Her grin was a little evil now. Mom, I said, rolling my eyes. You couldn't hide your glee. She chuckled and hid her smile in her own teacup. No. Not today. Dad released a heavy sigh. The pain in my head is improving, thank you both. Mom dropped her head and kissed my father on the lips. I glanced away, feeling weird and embarrassed to be witnessing such a thing, especially after all those years of thinking my mother would be forever single. Bella managed to help Dad sit up, and finally he was sitting erect with his back pressed into the headboard. You look so much better, Dad. And he did. The bruises and swelling had gone down, and although he didn't have his normal vigor, and his skin color was still the color of sour milk, he was healing. Thanks, he said, smiling gently. I can't believe it. You, Ava, your army, they've destroyed the council. Well, not totally destroyed, I said with a smile. What do you mean, Courtney? Dad asked, then I realized he hadn't been here for those discussions. I glanced over at Bella. We did an accidental type of vote, I guess. For a new council. And we made a pact. I wasn't sure if that would be permanent, or if everyone was still alive, but it was done. And that was what mattered. We were trying to follow through with what we said we would, making the effort. Who's on the new council? Mom asked. Crap. I hadn't, or we hadn't, thought about the effect this would have on Dad or Mom. Oh well, it's not final or anything, I said, glancing away. Despite not seeing my mother for quite some time, her eyes had this knowing sense about them, like they could see through any barrier I tried to erect around me. I didn't like it. Dad coughed out a laugh. Sweetheart, as the High Warlock, a position I was born into and never wanted. Don't for 1 second think I want it now. I want your mom, and I want time with my grandson. I want peace in whatever form that means, in whatever way that benefits everyone. Bella nodded at me. Who did you agree to? She asked, curious. Well, it was who was there, really. Oliver. Oh God, Oliver. I covered my mouth with my hands. It sounded silly, but even though I had known what happened to Oliver, it hadn't actually hit me until right then. Tears filled my eyes, and I couldn't stop the tears as they fell down my cheeks. Oliver's gone? Bella whispered. I heard Harry say something about that. I nodded. Yes, he died in the battle against the council. I wiped at the tears on my cheeks, the ones I hadn't let myself shed before now. Who else is on the new council? Dad croaked, his face a mask of grief. I glanced away, barely able to process my own pain, let alone my father's. Ava, Tavlor, me. 3 Phi elders and 3 shifters too. Dad sighed, his face going paler somehow. That sounds wonderful. Finally. A council for all our people. He closed his eyes and rested his head back on the pillows behind him. I'm feeling quite unwell again. I'm sorry. I hopped off the bed. I better go shower. I don't smell too great. Yeah, I wasn't going to say anything, Bella said with a small smile as she picked up Father's teacup. But you definitely need a shower. I backed away towards the door, and Bella hurried after me. Let me walk with you. I have to wash this anyway. We left our parents in their bedroom and walked down the hallway together. Bella didn't speak, but I could feel her thinking. I knew there were questions she wanted to ask, and I wished she wouldn't concern herself with how to ask them and just get on with them. "What's up, Belle?" I asked, deciding she needed a little push. She chuckled a little. "You haven't called me that in ages," she murmured, her voice filled with nostalgia. "Well, you're a married woman now," I said with a grin. "To a wolf shifter at that. Not someone to mess with." Bella smiled but didn't respond. We'd gotten to my bedroom now, and we both walked inside. It was obvious she wanted to say something. She vanished the teacup, and I was pretty sure it made itself to the sink, properly washed and waiting to be refilled for father. I grabbed her hand and squeezed her fingers. "Spit it out, Bella. I've gotta have a shower, and you don't want to see this body. It's a mess." She twisted her fingers in front of herself, looking all the world like a worried teenager. I would have laughed, but it would have hurt her feelings. I wanted to tell you something." I peeled off my t-shirt and inspected the stains. Blood. Sweat. Trash. Bella waved her hand and magicked me up a trash can in front of me. "Thanks." I threw the t-shirt in, then took off my shoes and socks. They joined the growing trash pile. I was unbuttoning my jeans when Bella finally said, "I always blamed Mother, you know. For separating us from our family. For hiding us." I stared at her, shocked. "Seriously? I thought you were the only one of us who was completely happy with our lives. The house. The library. The private realm." "Well, I was," she said quickly, chewing on her bottom lip. "Sort of. I convinced myself that our life was exactly as it should be, but at the same time, I wondered how different our lives could have been if we'd grown up here with Dad." I groaned as I peeled off my ripped, bloody jeans and tossed them in the trash too. I thought about that too, obviously. All the time. I wasn't quite sure where she was going with this, and the more I tried to assume, the more she surprised me by going somewhere completely unexpected. I was still wearing my underwear, but Bella's gaze dropped to my belly. "Your tattoo's gone." I put a hand to my stomach, the warmth of the tattoo that I'd worn for years now gone. "Yeah, and I miss it already," I replied, then I sighed. "Might need to go see a tattoo artist and get another one put on. This time, a permanent one." I grinned at her, and when she didn't respond, I added, "Thank you for that gift, Bella. Your magic kept us all alive a lot longer than we would have without you. I don't know what we would have done without it." "Who took it?" she whispered. "Who tried to kill you?" Her eyes were on my stomach, like she couldn't bear to look at me. "Oh well, it wasn't me. I used up half of it absorbing Tavlor's kill spell, and the other half went to saving Harry," I said. Now that I thought about it, I realized just how lucky I had been. Bella stared at me, her eyes wide and round. "You saved two of the most powerful warlocks in this realm?" she asked. I shrugged, then crossed my arms over my chest. "Yeah. It wasn't a big deal. If anyone else were in my position, they would have done the same thing." "And? What are you trying to say?" Bella threw herself at me, hugging me tightly. "I am so proud of the woman you've become, Court." I laughed and pulled out of her grasp. "Ah, Bella. Are you pregnant or something? Because you're acting weird." She laughed and pulled her hair up into a messy bun, securing it with a hair tie from her wrist. "Oh no. It's just, I could have lost you today. And you need to know I love you." I sidestepped her, getting closer to the shower. My skin was feeling tight and crinkly. "I really need this shower, Bella." She held her hand out towards me. "Yeah, I know, I just wanted to let you know that even though I don't have any kids yet, I think I can understand how Mother did it. Ran away from her home. Sacrificed everything for us. I didn't get it before, but now." I stopped, taking in what she was saying and finally seeing the full picture. "Because of today? Maddie." Bella nodded, her lip trembling. "I could have lost you and Ava. Dad, everyone we know and love. Even the thought of it would have made me too weak to survive in the past, if it were only me. But with Maddie." I prompted. She swallowed hard, hugging her body with her arms. I would have needed to care for Mom, and I would have had Christian of course, but if you'd failed, I would have had to take them all away and hide them. Just as Mother did for us. To keep them safe. And you would have, I said, seeing my sister in the light that she should be admired. Heart, brains and courage. A powerful combination. Yes, she said, nodding. I would have. Because the sacrifices you will make for a child. To protect those you love. She shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. Anyway, I just wanted to let you know that if you haven't fully forgiven Mother, I have. She's the strongest woman I've ever known. Tears burned in my own eyes, but Bella didn't stay to chat. She pivoted and left my bedroom, leaving a ton of emotion behind with her. I let out a world-weary sigh and charged towards the shower. I had a few tears I needed to cry too, and the shower was the perfect place for that. I scrubbed myself clean, washed my hair, then changed into fluffy warm pajamas. I let myself linger in the shower for as long as I could. It was the first time I was able to let my guard down in I didn't know how long. The hot water hit my body, soothing the tense muscles in my body. I took in a deep breath, then another. For a moment I closed my eyes, reveling in the fact that I was alive. Guilt gnawed at me. Sure, I was alive, but others weren't. No. Oliver wouldn't want you to sit around feeling sorry for yourself. I took another shaky breath, opening my eyes slowly. My eyes were a little puffy from crying, and my skin was red from the hot water. I was exhausted on a bone-deep level, but we'd achieved so much, I didn't want to complain. There was a knock at my door and Mom was there. Bella's made dinner if you want to join us. My stomach growled loudly as if on cue. Yes, definitely. I don't even remember the last time I ate. Mom slid her hand into the crook of my elbow, and we walked down the stairs and towards the dining room. So, you and your sister are going to be on the new council? She asked conversationally. Tavlor as well, and Harry too. I added. Shit, I forgot to list Harry before. Mother laughed. I love that you don't center your life or your decisions around a man, Courtney. I hope that never changes. I chuckled. Doubtful, Mom. Dinner was laid out in large dishes on the long dining table. Whoa. Who's coming to dinner, Bella? My sister walked through the door to the kitchen with bottles of wine. Everyone. Ava. Tavlor. Harry. The gang. I said with a grin. Is the council okay to be left without Ava and Tavlor? I wasn't sure how I felt about them not having any supervision. I didn't trust them. And by that I meant, would the criminals stay locked up? Our enemies stay away? And where were the remaining guards? There were too many questions and not enough answers. Bella shrugged, then marched back towards the kitchen. I don't know, she said. I just got word they were coming to eat. I suppose we'll find out when they get here. I wasn't sure that I liked that answer. It was too vague. But it wasn't like I had any choice but to accept what Bella said. I would wait and see, busying myself with chatting with everyone here and distracting myself from my thoughts that liked to creep into my head. An hour later I'd eaten 2 bread rolls with butter. Bella wouldn't let me start without everyone arriving, but was still starving. The fact that I had only eaten 2 rolls was me restraining myself. And if we didn't start soon, I was ready to magic stuff out of thin air to fill my belly. Just when I was about to create a lamb kebab with extra garlic sauce, there was a quick knock, and the front door opened. Sorry we're late. Ava called out, rushing in with Tavlor on her heels. Where's our baby boy? He's asleep. Bella said, gesturing to the stairs. In your room. Ava took 1 step up the stairs. I'll just go. No. I practically yelled at her, I'm about to die of starvation. Get your butt in here and eat, then you can go see Maddie. He's fine. I'd seen him when Bella had carried the little tyke to bed, already asleep on the couch. Ava rolled her eyes but came and joined us in the dining room. Harry and Christian walked in moments later. Hope we're not too late. I opened my mouth to reply, but Bella gave me a shove in the side. No. Not at all. Have a seat. I sat down, receiving a quick kiss from Harry before we all settled at the table. My two sisters and their husbands. Harry and I. I grinned at Ava. Our family's gotten big. Mother glided down the stairs and pulled out a chair. It certainly has, and we're missing a few men. She smiled. This isn't a surprise. They're never where they're supposed to be. Mom clicked her fingers, and our father magically appeared beside her, sitting in a chair. I couldn't help but crack a smile. It was good to see this playful side of her. I had only known her as someone serious. Loving, sure, but serious. You okay, Dad? I asked, shifting my gaze from my mother to my father. His skin was still sallow, and while his eyes had more life into them, he didn't look much better than he had before. You still look pale. He nodded, sitting up straighter. It seemed to take more effort than it should have. Our first dinner in our family home, with your mother. I couldn't miss it. Dad reached over to Mom, covering her hand with his. My heart warmed at the sight. Mom turned to look at him, tears in her eyes as she smiled at our father. The interaction had me looking away, only to find out that my sisters were doing the same thing. Fighting between the insane desire to watch our parents love, and yet finding it embarrassing at the same time. We'd all at one point in our lives expressed a wish that our parents would finally be able to be together. As they always were meant to be. Let's eat. Bella said suddenly, her voice uncharacteristically high. She lifted the lids off the platters, then clicked her fingers to make them disappear entirely. Oh wow, I gushed, grabbing a serving spoon for the butter chicken and rice dish. This looks great, Bella. Well, I think you all deserve an amazing meal. I'm not sure I've done enough, but dessert is pretty special. Everyone began serving themselves from the huge platters in the middle of the large wooden dining table. So, are we staying here, Dad? I asked, halfway through my first plate. I mean, are we living here? In the family home now? If you would like that, he said kindly, absolutely. Your sisters have their own houses and realms now, so you may want your own place with Harry too. I frowned at him. I spent my whole life wishing we could be a family, and I know you and Mom probably want some time alone, but I don't want to move out. In fact, I was kinda angry at the fact my father thought I would. Of course, if he just wanted Mom to himself for a few weeks, that was a different story. I could go visit other friends but move out when we just moved in. No. My emotions and thoughts, as always, must have shown on my face because Harry reached over and squeezed my thigh. Dad shifted in his chair. I didn't mean to suggest you leave. His voice was soft, gentle. Then don't. Bella answered quietly. I don't want to leave either. This is the house of our Adinolfi family. Our heritage. Dad glanced over at Mom, who was smiling at him in support. It was clear just how much she loved him, how happy she was to be with him after everything they had been through. Ava coughed and cleared her throat. Tavlor and I don't really have a home, she murmured. It took a lot for her to even say it, I could tell. We live with Tavlor's relatives and friends in the Phi realm. When we're here, we move around too. I'd love a base for Maddie, for us. Somewhere we could be a family. Somewhere we could settle. A place to call home. The air was heavy with anticipation and pain. I hated that we'd only just found our father, and he seemed to want us to go away already. It was like he was pushing us away, like he was afraid of being a family with us even though now we finally had the chance. Dad reached out his right hand for me and I gave him my left hand to hold. I gave him a squeeze, hoping he could tell just how much I loved him. Courtney, Bella, Ava, I think I need to say something so there are no more questions about this, he said. He cleared his throat. This house is your home. I never lived in it before as I had no children, and my wife was not a wife. Now that I have the three of you, and Genevieve, I have my family. I finally can call this old place a home, and that's because of you. So never, never believe you are unwanted. Or unloved. I love you all. He glanced around the table, looking at each of my sisters in turn. And I hope you never leave. There is 10 bedrooms in this place, enough for all of your children. And I'm sure we could add more if the need arose. More than 6 grandkids? I laughed. I'm not sure we'll be able to fill the bedrooms you already have. I glanced across at my sisters, who were both tearing up at my father's words. Dad squeezed my hand, dragging my focus back to him. I'm serious, Courtney, he said. I've spent my life doing what I'd been told was my responsibility, and it ruined my life. I missed out on your growing up, enjoying your mother's pregnancies. He let his voice trail off, pain flashing heavily in his eyes. Ava scoffed at that one. I was only 3, but I can tell you. Mom wasn't fun during her pregnancies. We all laughed, even Mother. Then Mom said, Matlock, you're here now. Her voice was gentle, even loving. We all are. Thanks to our talented, brave, wonderful daughters, we're together as we always should have been. We can't focus on what may or may not have happened in the past. We have to show our appreciation for what we have now, in this moment. She paused. Because we all know it could have been much worse. I love you. Dad whispered to Mom, and I had to look away. My heart and my tear ducts were beginning to overflow. Shall I swap to dessert? Bella asked, trying to diffuse the emotion in the room. Yes? Please. I managed to croak out. I wasn't really done with the bread and rice and veggies, but I'd always been a sweet tooth. Dessert first for me. Bella waved her hands around a little, then magically replace our main meal with platters of cakes and confections, cookies and creme brulee. Whoa. Harry said. That's an insane amount of sugar. Dad let my hand go finally, and I was immediately a little sad. I glanced over at Harry, my eyes wide with indignation. There's never too much sugar. I began scooping things onto my plate, piling the pink and white high. Harry coughed to clear his throat, and I glanced over at him. You okay? I asked. He nodded, then slipped the ring box I'd already seen onto the table beside me. I stilled, forgetting everything else for the time being. I know this is the beginning for your family, in so many things. Taking over the council, being together finally. My heart thumped against my ribs as I opened the box and stared down at the huge diamond right, with clusters of rubies around the band. And if you'll have me, Harry continued, I'd love to be a part of your family too, Courtney. If you'd agree to marry me. I stared up at his beloved face, amazed to realize that he was right, and that we weren't already married. I'd love that, I whispered. I can't imagine my life without you. Harry took the ring from the box, picked up my hand and slid the ring onto my finger. I didn't understand how it was possible, but it fit perfectly. Instead of weighing me down, a tingling surged through me, something that reminded me all was right in the world. My sisters were immediately out of their chairs, and pulling me up out of mine for huge hugs. I laughed as they cried a little, and Mom and Dad congratulated Harry and I from afar. I could tell Mom wanted to hug me, but she stayed seated with Dad. I gave her a big smile. We'd celebrate later. And voila! Bella said, pointing at the table. There, in the place where the cookie tray had once been, was a huge chocolate cake with the words, "Congratulations Harry and Courtney," written in the icing. That got me tearing up when nothing else had. Well, I gulped out, let's eat that cake. We have so many things to celebrate tonight. We do, Ava said, reaching out to cup Tavlor's face. Like the fact I still have my husband, mostly thanks to you, Court. I grinned at Tavlor. He would have done the same thing for me. And I'm here because of you. Harry said quietly, picking up my hand to kiss my fingers. And I'm here because of your wish, Courtney, Mom said, tears and happiness filling her eyes. I shook my head and covered my eyes. Enough, it's okay. Dad chuckled from beside me, and I put my hands down to check what he was laughing at. What, Dad? He just smiled at me. You, Courtney. You're amazing, and tonight, we celebrate you. He flicked his fingers at the table and 8 glasses of champagne appeared. Oh. Ava grabbed hers and started handing out the others. Perfect, Dad. When we all held a glass and were all standing, except for Mom and Dad, we looked towards the head of the table. Dad said, "To our beautiful family. To new beginnings, and to the strongest women I've ever known." "Hear, hear," Christian said, ducking his head to kiss his wife. I glanced around the table at the people I loved most in this world, and I couldn't believe they were my family. For the first time in my life, I knew the truth. I was the luckiest woman alive. Genevieve, 1 month later. I stared at the woman in the mirror, and could barely believe that my dream was about to come true. My fantasy that I'd held since I was a teenager, of becoming Mrs. Genevieve Adinolfi, Matlock's wife. At last. And the mother of his children. I had been the mother of his children for a while now. At least over 2 decades. And while I'm not proud of the fact that I hid them for so long from him, I couldn't find it in me to regret how anything happened. I was proud of my daughters, of who they became. Of who they were. The fact that they had endured so much and were still alive was a testament to their skill and talent, to their mind and instincts. I couldn't have been prouder. And now, we were finally going to make everything official. Matlock and I were going to get married. I couldn't wait. "Oh, Jen. You look amazing." Allison walked up behind me, dressed in royal purple and her tiny black car purring loudly on her shoulder. I turned around to face my oldest friend. My eyes teared up at seeing her. She had been with me for so long, and I honestly didn't know what I would have done without her by my side. I was so glad she was safe, that she could be here with me today. "I'm so glad you made it." Allison clasped her hands in front of her. "I wouldn't have missed your wedding, General." She shook her head in amazement, like she couldn't quite believe it herself. To Matlock. "I can't believe it. After all these years. It's hard to wrap my head around it, to be honest." I laughed, fluffing out my big skirts. "I know. People say they'd go to hell and back for those they love. Well, I did." My eyes fell to the floor. Normally, when I thought of my experience, tightness would take hold of my chest and anger would spark due to the fact that I had endured so much for so long simply for loving him. But now my throat closed up as my emotions overwhelmed me. Allison laughed. "I'm going to go and join the rest of the family outside," she said, bringing her hands together. She gave me a long look, and I could tell just how happy she was for me. My heart swelled. I was glad she could be here. "I just wanted to tell you that I'm so happy for you. I've prayed for this day for so long. For you. For all of it. And now it's finally here." I grabbed her hands and held them tight, locking eyes with her. I wanted her to know that I was grateful for everything, that I understood I couldn't have done it without her. "You saved me when I was pregnant and needed help," I reminded her. "You ran with me. You saved my children when I could not. And I will be forever grateful for you, my friend. Please believe me when I tell you that." Tears well in Allison's eyes and she shook her head. No tears today." She blew out a breath, trying to control her emotion. "I love you, General. I love you too, Allie." Then she left and I was alone once more. I sucked in a deep breath, trying to will the tears that accumulated in my eyes to disappear again in fear it would ruin my makeup. I had just enough time to catch my breath before another knock sounded, and Tavlor put his head into the room. "Are you ready?" I nodded, and walked towards the man who was going to give me away. "Thank you for doing this. My own father has long since passed. And I wasn't there for him. A fact that still haunted me." I shook the feeling off. Allison was right. Today was a day for celebration and happiness. No regrets or tears today. Tavlor offered me his arm, and together we walked out of my bedroom and down the staircase. "Wow," I whispered. "You've all done a magnificent job with the house." White and pink roses decorated the house, with fairy lights and greenery and white silk. I'd had my breakfast and morning tea in my room. The girls had told me not to come out until it was time. "It was mostly Bella actually," Tavlor whispered, "with a little help from some Phi cousins." I squeezed his arm. "Thank you." We walked toward the ballroom, and my stomach fluttered with huge butterflies that I would be embarrassed to admit existed. I was a grown woman. I shouldn't be nervous about marrying the love of my life. Surely. The doors opened and I gasped as my heart rate sped up. The ballroom had been transformed into a garden, with pews and white silk everywhere. It was a ballroom out of a fairy tale. For a moment I could do nothing but stare, taking it all in. I had dreamed about this day for so long, and now that it was finally here, now that it looked like this, I couldn't quite believe it. I blinked back the tears as Tavlor and I began to walk down the aisle, lined with rose petals. My 3 daughters stood at the altar, dressed in pale pink dresses, waiting for me. They looked absolutely beautiful. Pride surged through me once more, and I was so grateful I had them, so grateful they were standing with me that I found my resolve weakening. I finally lost my fight with my tears when my gaze met with Matlock's. He looked just as handsome as he had when we'd first fallen in love, over 20 years ago. But now, there was no embarrassment or shame in our union. We didn't have to hide our true feelings for each other. No council standing between us. No responsibilities that meant we had to choose separate lives for the greater good. We could finally choose each other. We could finally love freely. There was only our love and our children in our family home. I walked along the aisle toward my one and only love. When I finally reached him, he reached out for me and I floated towards him, Tavlor stepping away so that it was only Matlock touching me. The Phi elder who was officiating smiled at us and began the marriage ritual. I barely heard what the Phi said, instead choosing to get lost in Matlock's eyes and the love for me that I saw there. I recited the vows that we'd agreed on, and then it was done. Almost 30 years of waiting for this moment, praying for this impossible union to happen, and not it was over. We turned towards our family and friends sitting on the pews and facing us. It was an incredible sight to behold, and I took a mental picture, wanting to keep that image with me forever. Our 3 daughters with their husbands and fiancé, amidst a sea of grinning faces. Shifters and Phi, witches and warlocks. Men and women who had fought beside my girls, and were the main reason we were here today, alive and free. "Let's go celebrate, Mrs. Adinolfi." Matlock whispered into my ear and I turned to kiss him, not wanting to waste the moment. A cheer went up around us and I smiled as Matlock pulled away. "Let's go." We hurried down the aisle once more, back towards the house. "Where are we going?" I whispered back as we stepped into the house. Matlock swept his arm out and a portal appeared. "To our wedding reception," he said with that same charming smile I had fallen in love with so many years ago. "The shifters are putting on a party to end all parties, and we're the guests of honor." I laughed aloud. "Do we really deserve that sort of celebration?" I asked, tilting my head to the side. "We're just an old married couple now." Matlock pulled me into his arms tight, with enough passion to steal my breath. "No, my love," he whispered so only I could hear. "We're a young couple in love, just beginning our lives together. We have so much to make up for, and we will. I promise you that." I desperately wanted to kiss him again, but Ava gave me a poke from behind. "Come on, Mom. Let's go." I grinned back at my daughters, all beautifully smiling at us. How could I argue with that? "Okay, girls. Let's go." I grabbed my husband's hand and laced my fingers through his. For a moment I was silent, reveling in his touch. The simple fact that we could do this, hold hands, meant more to me than I had initially realized. Matlock was right. We did have a lot to catch up on. And we would. Together, I jumped with a fearless heart into a new world. Ava, 6 months later. Fear gripped my heart as the Phi healer, Talia, set her hands to my extended belly. Her touch was cool and soothing despite the emotions swirling inside of me. "Talia, I know you said that she's fine, but I don't know. I just can't shake the feeling something is very wrong," I said. This wasn't a new request. Talia smiled, humoring me, and closed her eyes. Part of me did feel bad. It felt like I was losing all control of my senses. I didn't understand why I was worried so much during this pregnancy, but I couldn't help it. And Talia was a godsend. I kept telling myself if something was truly wrong, she would sense it and I wouldn't have to worry, but I couldn't shake the feeling, and Mother raised me to follow instincts. Even if those instincts were covered in pregnancy hormones. I waited, alone with Talia in the small house. I hadn't brought Mom or Tavlor with me, too afraid to get bad news. I closed my eyes, feeling both selfish and selfless. I'd wanted to save Tavlor the grief of knowing our baby was dying, but now I needed him. I felt sick to my stomach, and I had to force myself to exhale my breath. Finally, Talia opened her eyes and smiled down at me. "Ava, I had great news for you," she said. "Your daughter is strong, she is healthy, and in fact you are going to struggle to contain her. She is more powerful than you and Tavlor put together." Relief washed over me so strong that I burst into tears. I wasn't expecting that. In fact, I was expecting the opposite. Grief tried to knot itself into balls in my stomach, but I was too relieved to care. The door to Talia's small house burst open and Tavlor flew in, his arms immediately going around me. "What's wrong? What happened? Is it the baby?" I sobbed against his shirt, hot tears clogging my throat. I couldn't speak. Talia pulled down my top so I could sit up and cuddle right into Tavlor's chest. "Talia," Tavlor said, his voice a little gravelly and threatening. I patted his shirt. "Don't be mad." Talia put her hand on my arm. "It's okay. Tavlor's allowed to be worried." I sighed and tried to relax, putting a hand on my belly and feeling my daughter kick and shift beneath my palm. She moved so much, it was hard to believe I had been worried about her. This was going to be a hard pregnancy, but if it meant my baby was safe and healthy, I would endure anything. Talia went on, "Tavlor, Ava has been worried about the health of your daughter since she found out she was carrying." That was indeed true. I told Tavlor of my fears. He dismissed it as being a silly worry, and I hadn't bothered him again. I didn't like that my instincts were being ridiculed, even though I knew that wasn't his intention. Even though I knew he was trying to reassure me. "Go on," he said, his heart thumping beneath my ear. "Your daughter was conceived days after the battle with the council, and Ava always worried that the stress of that time, or your almost dying, might affect her cellular makeup," she continued. I bit my lip and held my breath again. Silly. Now it was so silly, but at the time. Tavlor pulled back a little and reached for my chin, lifting my head up so I was staring up into his eyes. "Is this true?" he asked, quirking a brow. "Yes." I wiped at the wetness on my cheeks. I couldn't lie to him. I wouldn't, even if it made me feel silly for admitting it, now that I knew the opposite was true. And she's just so active and strange. I feel weak and nauseous and odd all the time. Tavlor glanced up at Talia, who was grinning now. "And that's because, as I just told Ava, that your daughter, who will be born in the next 2 months, is more powerful than you both." Tavlor's shock made me laugh and sit up further. "Yeah, that's how I felt." "But how is that possible?" Tavlor asked. Talia shrugged. "Perhaps it is the Phi and Witch blend of your blood. Or maybe Ava is right, and the timing of her conception means that your cells were charged with battle, and magic, and a stress that has created a child who will be able to handle the same." I swallowed the final lump of fear down and smiled at my friend. "Thank you, Talia. Any more advice for me?" She went over to her herbal cabinet and pulled out a bag. "You can steep this in hot water for pain relief when your labor starts, but until then, just enjoy the last stages of your last pregnancy." I gaped at her. "Sorry. My last pregnancy? What did she mean by that?" Talia went pale and her eyes widened. "Oh, I'm so sorry. I shouldn't have said anything." She turned away and her face washed with guilt and pain. I gulped, needing to know now. She couldn't leave me hanging like that. Not when I had already endured too much. "No, you can tell me," I said, trying to keep my voice from shaking, trying to keep my patience in check. "Tell us. We need to know now." Tavlor took my hand and waited for Talia to let us know what she'd seen, when she'd obviously tapped into our future in a reading. "I'm sorry, I can't always control what I can see," Talia murmured. She still wouldn't look at me, and that made it worse. We know. I whispered. It's okay, Talia. Just tell us. She heaved a sigh. Finally, she picked up her gaze and rested them on my face. Sympathy, a burst of it, flooded her eyes. After you give birth to your daughter, you don't fall pregnant again, Ava, she said softly. Never again. I asked, my voice cracking. She shook her head. Not due to illness or injury, she said. You just don't conceive again. Maddie and this little girl will be your only children. I nodded slowly, absorbing the information I'd never thought to receive. Honestly, I hadn't thought much about children even after getting married to Taylor, but now that that possibility had been taken from me, it was all I could think about. I sucked in a breath, my mind racing. I wasn't sure what to think, what to feel. In fact, I said the first thing to come to my head. A perfect pigeon pair. I whispered, then coughed to clear my throat. As Mother would say. Tavlor was strangely quiet, and I glanced up to see the pain in his face. What's wrong? I asked. You're not blaming yourself, surely? He nodded and didn't speak, my brave warrior overcome with emotion. I looked to Talia for help, and she came to the rescue. It's not your fault either, Tavlor. I believe the fates and the universe have given you two perfect children. And they will be enough. They will need your guidance, as they will both be on the council, and they will both be leaders of us all. I blinked away the tears, Talia's voice taking on the tones of someone foreseeing the future. I looked up at my husband. Sounds like we've got incredible children. He nodded. Yes, but only two. I cackled out a laugh. Only two? I asked. How many did you want? His smile was all lopsided and adorable. I don't know, he admitted. For most of my life I believe I would never be a father, so I count my lucky stars every day with Maddie. So this little girl. He let his voice trail off, but I knew exactly what he was thinking. Is a miracle, I finished for him, grinning at Talia now. Thank you for telling me this, Talia. I really appreciate it. Really? She asked, obviously still feeling angry at herself for spilling the news. Her eyes were wide, filled with hope. Yes? I said, deciding to see this news in the most positive light. It would make us appreciate the time I had with my children, instead of being upset I didn't have more. I rubbed my big belly and explained. I don't love being pregnant, and this pregnancy has been particularly hard. I was dreading the next 2 months. But now, knowing this will be the last time I'm like this, well, I'm going to treasure every moment. Talia had actually given me a gift. Knowing that this baby would be my last, I would go into the labor unafraid. I knew she would survive, as would I. And that was the only thing I could ask for. I would treasure those months of breastfeeding, and wish each milestone she hit to slow down so that I could enjoy her all the more. I slipped my legs off the table and grabbed Tavlor's hand. Thank you again, Talia. You've put my mind at ease completely. I haven't been this excited in 6 months. Talia waved us goodbye, and I walked out into the fresh air with my husband. I took a big lungful of air and closed my eyes. The sun was on my face, the scent of dirt and pine in my nostrils. Life was wonderful. Tavlor's fingers caressed my cheek, brushing my hair behind me ear. I opened my eyes to stare up at him. I can't believe that after everything we've been through, our lives, our babies, everything is going to work out all right. Tavlor stepped in front of me so we were face to face, his hands going on either side of my big belly, holding our daughter between us. I can. He said with a smile. It's because we've gone through everything we have, that I know we're going to be okay now. After a lifetime of believing I was abhorrent, thanks the original council, it's me that can't believe I'm standing here with my wife and child, knowing that the new council is saving lives. And I've been a part of that. I reached for his beloved face, cupping his jaw in my hands. Tavlor, I always told you that you were beautiful, and our children are proof of that, I murmured, hoping he could detect the sincerity in my words. He leaned forward and kissed me, then a beautiful little voice called out, Mama. I turned towards the voice, and Matty was running towards me, his babysitter hot on his heels. I cracked a smile, unable to help it. Matty stumbled, then caught himself, his chubby little legs pumping hard. Tavlor stepped up to him, sweeping our toddler up to stop him bowling me over. "Mama! Mama!" Matty called out, reaching for me with outstretched arms and chubby little hands. My eyes misted at the sight. "Of course you can have Mama," Tavlor said, handing him over so I could put Matty safely on my hip. "Just gotta be careful of Sissy," Tavlor finished. Matty ignored the comment about his baby sister, as he often did, and wrapped his arms around my neck tightly. "My Mama." I laughed and hugged him tight, bringing my cheek against his. "I think Talia was right," I said. "2 of these are going to be more than enough. And I'm going to love every minute of it." Tavlor chuckled, and I closed my eyes, breathing in my son's earthy scent. My grip on him tightened even more, and for a split second I held him like I would never hold him again. But no. I would hold him for my lifetime, always. These days of peace were new and beautiful, and I was going to focus and enjoy every second. Bella, 1 year later. I'd never wanted to be on the council. I didn't particularly want to decide laws and other things, when I would rather read and do help in the background. But with Ava having her daughter and stepping back, it had turned to me to step up. I wasn't able to run from this. Tavlor had missed a lot of meetings also, so when the council had asked me to fill in, I couldn't say no even though I wanted to, and even though I looked for any reason I could to get me out of it. "You ready to go?" Christian asked, tapping his wrist as though he had a watch on, which he didn't. I groaned, putting the last of my books in my bag. "You know I don't like these meetings," I said. I really tried hard not to complain about it all the time, but there were days like this one, when I was particularly resistant to going. "Do I really have to go?" Christian cackled out a laugh. "Ah, yeah, right," he said. "I've seen you in these meetings. You read your book, pretending you aren't there for all of 2 minutes. Then the moment they start arguing about policy, you're on your feet, fighting for equal footing for all." He rolled his eyes. "It's difficult to think you don't enjoy your time there, when you make such an impact." I shrugged. "So?" He crossed his arms over his big strong chest. "Bella, just because you've been the wallflower your whole life doesn't mean you have to stay in that role," he pointed out. I lifted my bag up and slung it over my shoulder. "I shouldn't have lent you that book on character archetypes, should I?" I snipped. He cackled with laughter. "You're stronger than you pretend you are, Bella. And you've proved that so many times over. When are you going to own it?" When I finally felt like I could be brave, without needing to save someone's life. "Thanks, honey." I kissed him goodbye and walked to the front door of our cottage. "See you tonight." He waved me off and I made my way to the Shifter Realm entry, still in place thanks for my father's magic. We'd let a lot more people in since the fall of the old council, but the Shifters had long memories, and it would take a long time for them to trust the majority of witches and warlocks. I understood the sentiment, even if it made me a little sad. I had hoped I would see them start to heal, start to forgive, at least in my lifetime, but I wasn't sure if that was going to be possible. Either way, what improvement I had noticed was important, and we couldn't forget that. I wandered through the portal and into the streets. So many shops were vacant now, their owners deciding they didn't want to support the new council. Or didn't want to hang around to watch the animals take over our town. It made me furious. I tried not to let it get to me, but it was hard. I shook my head, remembering the hatred that had flowed over so many of the witches I'd spoken to. I didn't understand it. How could anyone hate someone for how they were born? How did that affect who they were? It didn't make any sense to me. I kept walking, choosing to ignore those shops and focus on those that were still alive and kicking. The cafes full of people, the clothing shops where even the Fae were now welcome. The doors between the worlds were open, and although most people were still very nervous about the changes, they were slowly venturing out. Courtney met me on the steps, going up to the council building. "Hey!" I called, surprised to see her. What's going on? Meetings cancelled today, she said with a grin. Some of the shifters couldn't make it, and the Fae said it was actually their full moon, something. So we rescheduled everything for next week. I breathed a huge sigh of relief. Oh, I'm glad. Courtney laughed. You're really good with people, Bella, even if you don't think so. I know you are. You've gotta believe in yourself. I knew that. But I didn't like talking about it. You know what? I did have an errand I wanted to run today. Wanna come with? Sure, she answered, before I even told her where I wanted to go. But true to Courtney's personally, she just walked alongside me as I trekked the path back to the portal to Earth. The one that brought us all here. You gonna tell me where we're going now? Court asked, practically skipping along as she danced to avoid the cracks in the pavement. I thought we should go and visit Aunt Allison. Mom said she's been unwell. And she'd been unwell since before Mom and Dad's wedding but told no one. In fact, I was surprised I knew about it. Then again, I picked up on these things much better than my sisters ever had. And since it wasn't my secret to tell, I held on to that knowledge with reverence. Oh cool. Yeah, okay. We walked over to the same portal we'd come to this realm in, and a shiver of unease coursed over me. I wasn't sure what to expect, and because of that, I couldn't figure out how to prepare for it. I didn't like that. Not at all. You all right, Bella? Court asked, seeing my reaction. I nodded and wrapped my arms around myself, taking in a deep breath. Yeah, just, last time I was here I was carrying you in a tiny box, desperate and terrified. Courtney put her arm around my shoulders and squeezed tight, her warmth encasing me. The first of many times you've saved my life. I chuckled and shrugged her off, ignoring the way my cheeks turned pink. Come on. Let's go see Allison. Did you see the black cat she brought with her to Mom and Dad's wedding? Courtney asked with a gasp of humor in her voice. She named the cat Genevieve. I think that's a perfect name for it, don't you think? I laughed at Mew's sister and tried to match her tone. Did you know that I made that cat as a gift? As a thank you for saving your life, and for helping me when I had no one. Courtney's smile disappeared. I'm sorry. I didn't mean it like that. I swatted at her, rolling my eyes at her dramatics. Oh, stop it, we were playing. I mean, I sometimes forget what you had to go through to get me here, safely. She gestured to the world around us. I elbowed her in the side, not wanting to get all emotional today. What are sisters for, right? Let's go. I jumped through the portal, not worrying about the cold air that rushed past my face. We popped out in the alleyway near the trash cans, and I hurried along the cobblestones to get back to the main road. Yuck, I'd forgotten that we'd land in a trash heap. Courtney shuddered and ran after me. Yeah, you left that part out. I followed my memories of brick fences and little streets, until I was once again standing in front of Aunt Allison's picturesque house. For a moment I could do nothing but stare. I took in the sight, my memories teasing me with familiarity. My chest tightened, and I wasn't sure if I was excited at the prospect of stepping inside, or worried about what I might find there. But no. I couldn't be scared. Not when she needed us. Oh, how pretty is this? Courtney commented, reminding me once again that although she'd been with me when we'd been at Aunt Allison's house last time, she hadn't been conscious. Her voice snapped me out of my thoughts. Come on. The moment I stepped through the picket fence, I could feel the change in the magic surrounding the home. Oh no. I rushed for the front door, red and vibrant. The magical wards were thin, the protection that had once been here was long gone. I raised my hand and rapped on the door. I couldn't keep up the facade around Courtney any longer, my concern too strong. Aunt Allison. She didn't answer, so I reached for the doorknob to find it warm. I think she's got some sort of spell over the door. Courtney nodded. Yeah, say your name and why you're here. I've read about these spells. I didn't bother asking how my sister knew about a spell that I didn't. She'd changed a lot since becoming the daughter of the High Warlock. I focused on the door. Aunt Allison, it's me, Bella, and my sister Courtney. We've come to check on you. See how you are. The lock clicked loudly and the door opened with a creak. I glanced at my sister. Good job. She gave me a gentle shove. Come on. Let's go. I stumbled into the house and called out, Aunt Allison? Bella. Came the whispered reply. I raced into the living room, where Aunt Allison lay on the couch, converted into a sofa bed. I knelt down on the floor beside her and grabbed her hand. Immediately, my mind went through solutions, all the ways in which I could fix the problem. She was clammy and cold to the touch. I clenched my teeth together, trying not to let my emotions get the better of me. Aunt Allison. Why didn't you call us? We would have come sooner. She smiled softly. I didn't want anyone to see me like this, but now that you are here, I am glad, she said. It's always so good to see you girls. She exhaled slowly, as though she were releasing the final breath for her final leg of the race. I glanced at Courtney, who had pulled a chair over to sit on the other side of the bed. What can we do, Aunt Allison? I asked, trying to soften my tone. I didn't want it to come out like I was being demanding. At the same time, I needed information in order to help, and right now, she had all the necessary information. She smiled at Courtney, then looked back at me. You need to look after my Genevieve for me. She pushed back the blanket to reveal the tiny black cat asleep on her chest. She won't have anyone after I'm gone. I blinked at her. Certainly, I hadn't heard her right. Gone. Is there nothing that can be done? She smiled softly at me again. I've had a nice life, Bella. Don't wish me any more. Helping you mother and you too were highlights of my many years. Next to my gift from you, of course. She stroked the black cat with her finger and the Genevieve cat stretched and yawned, leaning into Allison's touch. But I live in a world with wolf shifters. I whispered. I can't have a pet cat. It was such a silly thing to focus on, but I couldn't help it. Oh, of course you can. Allison said with nonchalance I envied. You have a few years until your children come along, and until then, she can be your baby. Think of it like practice. Preparing. I know how much you like to prepare for things. Allison managed to scoop the tiny cat up into her hands, and lift her over to me. I took the cat, holding her sleeping body close to my warmth, then Allison's words hit me. My children? I asked. Again, I didn't think I heard her correctly. Allison cackled out a laugh that sounded dusty. Yes. I won't spoil the surprise, but you have more than Ava. My jaw dropped and Courtney giggled from the other side of the bed. Bella and her pack, huh? Allison smiled down at me. Thank you for coming to say goodbye. I swallowed the lump of emotion in my throat. I didn't mean to come to say goodbye. What is it? She asked. I smiled, dashing away the tears that had slipped past my guard. I wanted to thank you. For what you said about my future. You were right, of course. Christian was waiting for me, as was my new family. Allison smiled and closed her eyes. I always knew you'd do what I couldn't, Bella. Step out from behind the books and grab hold of your life. I'm so proud to know you. To know you all. She drifted away from speaking, then seemed to slump in the bed. My heart stopped. Allison? Courtney leaned over and put her hand on Allison's cheek, then pressed her fingers to the place where Allison's pulse should beat. I held my breath, as I waited for the prognosis I was terrified to hear. She's gone. Courtney whispered, taking her hands away once more. I rested my head on the bed and sobbed for a moment, a wave of grief rushing over me, as the woman who'd given me so much left us forever. A tiny paw batted at my cheek, and I lifted my head to see Genevieve's violet eyes staring back at me. I didn't know how she did it, but my sadness lifted enough for me to be able to stand up and cradle the cat to my chest. What are we going to do? Courtney bit her lip, at a loss for words. Would Allison want a witch's funeral? Should we call Mother and find out if she knew what Aunt Allison would want? Courtney nodded. Good idea. I can rush back if you want. Now. Are you okay to stay with her? I sat down on the bed, the cat crawling up to sit on my shoulder and nestle into my neck, purring loudly. Yeah, of course. I'd be happy to stay. Courtney came around to my side of the bed and squeezed my shoulder. I'll be as quick as I can. Courtney ran away, and I found an old rocking chair and 100 purple pillows to rest in. I wasn't freaked out like my sister was. There was a peace to death that I respected. And Allison's body deserved the respect of being laid to rest where she wanted. So I stayed until my parents arrived to help, and I knew I'd fulfilled my purpose and the promise of this day. Courtney, 5 years later. My hair was a mess and I hadn't slept in 3 days, but hey, that's what being a mom was about, right? This was the glow of motherhood, the battle in the trenches where everything was worth it in the end. At least, that was what I kept telling myself. The truth was, motherhood was much harder than I realized. Ava made it look so easy that by the time I realized the truth, I felt like I had been tricked. Still though, I wouldn't change it for the world. I wouldn't change anything I went through that led me to this point. Courtney. You here, sweetheart? I rolled my eyes at my mother's question. Had I left the house in 2 weeks? No. Had I considered it? Almost every second. Upstairs, Mom, I called back. I was pacing the hallways with my newborn daughter, my first and last if I had my way. Bloody Harry, wanting to be a family. If someone had told me that pregnancy sucked ass and labor was worse, I would have told him no. Again, I found myself blaming Ava. Maybe. The baby was bloody cute. Mom popped her head in the nursery, a smile on her face. Need some help? She asked, way too cheery. Welcome back, I said, meaning it. My parents had gone on a vacation for a week, and I'd missed their help. Is he asleep? She whispered, and I turned around so she could see his little face over my shoulder. Oh baby boy, Mom clucked, walking closer, I'll take him. You go have a shower. I just got him to sleep. I panicked as she rolled him off me and into her arms. I held my breath, waiting for the usual cry. The little bugger stayed fast asleep, of course. My shoulders sagged in relief. Thanks, Mom. Go, she whispered, snuggling up close to him. I fled to my bedroom, going straight to the bathroom where a monster stared back at me. Oh my God. My hair looked like a tornado had whipped the curls into some sort of straightened, tangled bird's nest. I needed a nap so bad, but I couldn't just magic myself clean. I had no strength for that, plus all I wanted was to feel the hot water rushing over my face. There was something about taking a shower, it was the only alone time I got nowadays, and I didn't want to waste a single second of it. I stripped off and practically fell into the shower, hot water washing away the days of baby puke, grime and sweat. The water had the perfect amount of pressure, the water soaking into my skin with just enough force to make me feel good. I reached up to lean my arms against the tile, letting the water cascade down my back. I closed my eyes, taking it all in. I sighed. I loved my kids more than anything, but I loved this piece too. When I was finally clean enough to turn the water off, I half-dried myself, pulled on an old t-shirt of Harry's and fell into bed. I pulled the blankets up, only to hear Mom sneak into the room. You feeling better? I groaned. Yeah, thanks, Mom. I'm going to let you sleep, and don't worry about the baby, I've got him. Thank you. I whispered, knowing full well I'd be awake in a few hours to feed him, but grateful nonetheless. When I woke, it was with a start. It was dark now, and I had no idea what time it was. I jumped out of bed and raced over to the nursery to find Mom there, putting my son back into his crib. My heart was pounding too hard. I felt sick. I staggered over to a hallway chair that was more like a comfortable pew from a church, and sat down. My breathing was too erratic after launching myself out of bed that fast. So I focused on doing some slow breaths, inhaling and exhaling, trying to stop the racing of my heart. When Mom finally stepped out of the nursery and shut the door, I was able to stand up and tug at my t-shirt, realizing I was wearing practically nothing. Not that Mom hadn't seen me like that before, especially during the long hours of my birth, but still was a little strange now. "What time is it?" I asked her, feeling woozy. Mom waved her hand, and I was suddenly dressed in a pair of black jeans and my own gray t-shirt. Apparently, she thought it was strange too. I chuckled. I couldn't blame her. I smiled at her as I pushed my now frazzled but dry hair out of my face. She gestured I should follow. "Let's go get something to eat." She said it in a way that made it clear she wasn't making a suggestion. This was a command if I had ever heard one before. "You must be starving." I followed her down the stairwell to the kitchen, frowning at the clock as I walked past. 11 o'clock? That's not p.m. surely? I asked, racking my brain for the time I showered, then to the nap. Last time I checked, it was 9 o'clock in the morning. I was probably only out for a couple of hours tops. Mom gestured for me to come sit at the kitchen counter, and I flopped down onto the stool. She immediately waved her hands and created a beef burger and chips in front of me, then a large slice of lemon pie with cream. It was exactly what I didn't know I needed. I groaned, my mouth watering at the sight. "Oh, thank you." I'd missed Mom and Dad for so many things. But the instant food was high up that list. Elfish maybe, but it was the truth. I picked up the burger and dug in, without waiting for permission. "It's hard with Harry away, isn't it?" Mom said. I groaned as I bit into the burger, loving the taste of the meat and salad, egg and bacon. God, it was heaven. I nodded. "Yeah, it sucked." Mom smiled and crossed her arms over her chest. "It's hard, isn't it, raising a baby on your own?" I remember it all too well. I froze. Holy shit. My mother had three babies in 3 years and had been all alone. And 21. I was 27, and had a husband, 2 sisters and my parents to help. I forced down the bite of the burger in my mouth and said, "Sorry, Mom. You must think I'm super weak compared to you." There were times I certainly felt this way. I wasn't sure I could ever do what she did, especially when it came to playing the long game. She was patient, calculating, and knew exactly how to get what she wanted. How could I ever do anything like that? She laughed and magicked up a drink for me too. "Oh honey, no. I'm just saying I understand," she said. I remember. I was lucky though, I didn't have any of the council work you did during your pregnancy. And you girls were pretty good babies. I stared down at my burger. Unlike my son who screamed bloody murder all day and night. I winced just thinking about it. "How did you feed him all day without me?" I asked, not caring at this point as I continued to take huge bites of my burger. I might have been chewing with my mouth open too. One of the 5 young women came to nurse him. She has a baby a similar age. "I hope you don't mind, but you looked like you needed some uninterrupted sleep." "That was a great solution," I said. "Thank you." My boobs were aching now with milk, but I'd express some bottles and put them away in hopes to alleviate the pain. I definitely need to ask her to do some more days for me. "Well, with Harry away with council business, we probably need an extra hand or 2 around here," she agreed, glancing around the room as if she wanted to emphasize the point. I sighed, feeling defeated. I had no idea this mom stuff was so hard. Ava and Bella make it look easy. I glanced at her. "Even you made it look easy, Mom." Mom cackled out a laugh. "Oh, it's never easy, sweetheart. Some people just hide their troubles better than others. You've always worn your heart on your sleeve." I gripped my head in my hands, leaning my elbows on the counter. "I feel like I'm failing so badly at the moment, Mom." She pushed the plate with the pie towards me and I picked up the spoon. She was right. Everything was better after dessert. "I don't know how you did it, Mom." I shook my head, angry now at the hot tears that were swimming in my eyes. I'd been trying to keep my head above water since the baby was born, but I just couldn't. "Oh, sweetheart, stop. Listen. You need a little help, and I'm gonna get it for you, okay?" She waved away any concern I might have had. "We'll get the baby on bottles, or a nursemaid if you want one." We'll help more with the overnights, and most important, we'll get Clarissa here to assess you and see if you need some healing work. You just have to make sure you give yourself the time you need to catch up on sleep and reconnecting with yourself. I dashed away the tears and stared up at her. Healing work? I'm fine. She reached across the counter and grabbed my hand. You're not, sweetheart. I've seen you battle the council, take a hit that would have killed Harry and Tavlor, and keep on fighting. She shook her head. You know I'm right. You might be able to lie to anyone else, but not your mother. You know this. More tears welled up in my eyes and I shoved more pie and cream into my mouth. Mom went on, Courtney, the last 6 years you've torn down centuries of laws based on discrimination and hatred. You've fought for the rights of the Fae and shifters, without turning your back on the magical community. You've been the woman I could never be. I was selfish, still am, if I'm being honest. All I cared about was Matlock, being with him. I could never have sacrificed my chance at that for anyone else, even the greater good. You are fearless. And strong. And capable. I gulped as my throat burned with tears. And I can't even feed my baby or put him to sleep, I said with a sniffle. I didn't want to feel sorry for myself, I didn't, but I couldn't hold back anymore. That's when the flood of tears overwhelmed me, and I sobbed until I was sick with it. Mom raced around the counter and held me tight, while I let the frustrations and worries of the past few weeks out of me. When I was finally exhausted, Mom washed my face with a cleansing spell and made me a hot chocolate. I settled on the couch beside her, finally feeling a little better. I think you're right, I managed to say, I might need my hormones or something looked at. Mom grinned at me. Absolutely, sweetheart. You're a beautiful mom, you're not failing. And trust me, your son is going to love you. We aren't all designed to be great with babies. Some mom are better when their kids want to run around and play. Personally, give me a baby any day. I chuckled a little, as images of growing up with 2 sisters filled my mind. Mom hadn't played with us much as kids. She taught us, but had mostly left us to play together. That'll be me. I said, I want to take him running and traveling. Teach him magic and to play with his cousins. And he will, and you will, she said. We've just got to look after you, sweetheart. Your body's gone through a lot between the poisoning, the attacks, the spells and the stress. You've more than earned a rest. I shuffled closer and put my head down on her shoulder. Thanks, Mom. Maybe I could get a nanny in, so I could go to some of the council missions with Harry. Mom chuckled. Sweetheart. You can do whatever you set your mind to. I smiled and closed my eyes. She was right. Not everyone's path was the same. I had an amazing husband and a baby, but my life was full of responsibilities that I loved, and maybe it was time to try and balance them all. The end of the Daughters of the Warlock series. A note from the author. Thank you so much for reading the final book in the Daughters of the Warlock series. It has been truly a labor of love, and a series that pushed me out of my comfort zones as an author. When I started plotting this series in 2019, I didn't plot. I still don't really. I'm known in the author world as a pantser. A writer that writes by the seat of their pants. But I was also a writer that wrote only standalone same-world trilogies, and often too short by some people's estimations. So I created this series, choosing to create 3 trilogies, continuous characters, and 1 world. Oh, and low heat. I'd never written low heat before. It was insanely intimidating, but I did it sort of. I wrote the first 5 quickly, then when they weren't selling and 2020 COVID stuff hit, and I gave birth to my 3rd child in August 2020, I canceled the remaining books, believing readers didn't like my series or my characters. But after going wide with my books, they were given a new lease on life, and I am so happy to say that the series is done. I made it just. And thank you. If you are reading this, you have bought the other books and you made it possible to finish this series.